An employee became the obsession of the CEO, who lost control when another man got close to her. A forbidden romance changed their lives forever. Get ready, because this story will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment where you are watching from. The January sun beat down on New York City with that humid, suffocating heat that clung to the skin like a second layer. On the 30th floor of the Johnson Corporate Tower, the central air conditioning struggled to maintain a temperature of 72 degrees, yet the atmosphere felt charged with palpable tension, as if the building itself sensed that something was about to change on that first Monday of the year. Emily Johnson adjusted for the third time the navy blue blazer she had bought on sale the week before. It was her first day as a senior financial analyst at Johnson Investment Group, one of the largest asset management firms in the country, and her fingers trembled slightly as she held the synthetic leather briefcase her daughter had given her for Christmas. She was 32 years old, but that morning she felt like an insecure intern stepping into the job market for the first time. "Mom, you're going to do great. You're the smartest of them all." The high-pitched voice of Sophie, her 7-year-old daughter, still echoed in her mind. The girl had woken up early just to help her mother choose her outfit, and her brown eyes sparkled with pride as she styled Emily's hair with a pink hairpin. Emily had knelt down to her daughter's height and held her little face with both hands. "Princess, Mommy is going to work hard today, okay? Grandma will pick you up from school and you'll sleep at her house. I promise I'll get you early tomorrow." "That's fine, Mom. I know you need to work for us to have nice things. Aunt Sarah explained it to me," Sophie replied, with a disconcerting maturity for her age. Emily had been a single mother for 3 years, ever since she discovered that her ex-husband David was having an affair with a co-worker. The discovery had been devastating. She was 6 months pregnant when she found the messages on his phone. The divorce was quick and bitter. David paid child support irregularly and saw their daughter only once a month, always with excuses about work and new commitments with his current wife. It had been 3 years of rebuilding. Emily had moved back in with her mother, Mrs. Smith, in a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn while finishing her MBA in corporate finance on weekends. She worked at a mid-sized company, waking up at 5 in the morning to drop Sophie off at school before her shift and spent her nights studying after her daughter fell asleep. Every sacrifice had a purpose, to give Sophie the stability she never had as a child, and now finally the effort was paying off. The position at Johnson Investment Group meant almost double her previous salary, top-tier health insurance, a generous meal allowance, and most importantly, the possibility of renting her own apartment for herself and Sophie. It was the chance to truly start over. "Emily Johnson." A feminine voice pulled her from her thoughts. An elegant woman, approximately 50 years old, with impeccably cut grey hair in a long bob and discreet framed glasses, extended her hand with a warm smile. "I'm Sarah Thompson, Executive Assistant to Dr. Michael Johnson, our CEO. Welcome." "Nice to meet you, Sarah. Thank you for the warm welcome." Emily shook her hand, noticing the firm and confident grip. "No problem, dear. We're very happy to have you with us. Your resume is impressive, especially considering your personal challenges." Sarah lowered her voice slightly, and Emily realized she knew about her status as a single mother. It wasn't something she hid, but it also wasn't information she liked to disclose right away. "Before I take you to meet your team, I need you to attend the quarterly results meeting. It's company protocol that all new senior analysts attend the first presentation to understand our methodology and organizational culture." Emily nodded and followed Sarah down a wide corridor with travertine marble flooring and walls adorned with abstract paintings that probably cost more than she would earn in an entire year. Impeccably dressed employees moved back and forth, all seeming to know exactly where they were going and what they were doing. She tried to ignore the flutter in her stomach that insisted on reminding her that this was a world completely different from what she was used to. The conference room looked like something out of a corporate architecture magazine. A tempered glass table dominated the center of the room, surrounded by German leather chairs. A whole wall was made of glass, offering a breathtaking panoramic view of New York City. Fifth Avenue stretched like a vital artery, surrounded by skyscrapers reflecting the morning sunlight. Emily could see Central Park in the distance, a green patch amid the concrete. "Sit here, dear. The meeting starts in 5 minutes." Sarah indicated a chair in the middle of the table, strategically positioned for a good view of both the projection screen and the head of the table, where presumably the CEO would sit. As other executives and analysts arrived and took their seats, Emily took the opportunity to observe. There was an invisible but palpable hierarchy in the seating arrangement. Directors sat closer to the head of the table, managers in the middle, and analysts, like her, filled the ends. A man in his mid-30s, with dark hair slicked back with gel, a perfectly tailored grey suit, and a smile revealing teeth too white to be natural, sat down next to her. "You must be the new analyst everyone is talking about," he said, extending his hand. "James Carter, manager of corporate marketing. I just transferred from Chicago 2 weeks ago." "Emily Johnson, senior financial analyst. Nice to meet you." She briefly shook his hand, noticing that he held on for a second longer than necessary. "The pleasure is all mine. If you need anything at all, my office is 2804. My door is always open for you." His smile widened, and Emily felt a slight discomfort. There was something in the way he looked at her that felt familiar and unpleasant. It was the same kind of attention that married men often gave her at work happy hours. That interest disguised as kindness. "Thank you. I'll remember that," she replied politely, but cold enough to discourage further intimacy. Before James could continue, the double doors of the conference room swung open, and the murmur of conversation ceased instantly. Sarah entered first, followed by a man who made Emily's heart skip a beat without her quite understanding why. Michael Johnson was 40 years old, but seemed ageless. He stood 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders that perfectly filled out his tailored navy blue suit, and an upright posture that conveyed authority effortlessly. His dark brown hair had silver strands at the temples, as if time had chosen to mark only the strategic points to add distinction rather than age. His face was angular, with a strong, slightly clenched jaw, as if he were permanently evaluating and calculating. But it was his eyes that truly captured attention. Dark brown, almost black, with an intensity that made anyone feel simultaneously scrutinized and understood. There was something else, however. A shadow of sadness lingered around him like an invisible aura, perceptible only to those who truly paid attention. It was the kind of sadness that comes from deep losses, the kind that leaves permanent marks on the soul. Michael walked to the head of the table without looking at anyone specifically, placed a leather folder on the glass, and finally raised his eyes to scan the room. Emily felt when his gaze landed on her. It was only a second, maybe 2, but it was enough for her to notice something changing in his expression. His eyes widened imperceptibly, his posture became slightly more rigid, and he blinked twice in quick succession, as if trying to focus better. "Good morning, everyone." His voice was deep and controlled, carrying the kind of natural authority of someone used to being obeyed without question. "Before we begin the analysis of the fourth quarter, I would like to officially welcome our new senior financial analyst, Emily Johnson." All eyes turned to her, and Emily felt her face heat up. She nodded discreetly, maintaining the professional posture she had trained over the years. "Emily comes with an impressive background," Michael continued, and she realized he was reading something from a tablet in front of him. But then he raised his eyes again and fixed them directly on her. MBA in corporate finance from Harvard, with top marks in all modules, specialization in risk analysis, and a track record of 93% accuracy in market projections. Additionally, he paused, and Emily had the strange sensation that he was about to mention something personal, but then he simply concluded, additionally, she achieved all this while overcoming challenges that would break most people. Welcome to the team. There was a murmur of approval around the table, but Emily barely registered it. She was focused on the way Michael was looking at her, as if he were trying to memorize every detail of her face. It wasn't disrespectful or inappropriate. It was almost reverent, as if he had seen something in her that left him completely disarmed. The meeting continued with performance graphs, market analyses, and projections for the next quarter. Michael led everything masterfully, asking sharp questions that made it clear he had complete mastery over every aspect of the business. But Emily noticed, and she was sure no one else did, that he looked in her direction with a frequency that went beyond casualness. They weren't obvious or awkward glances, but she felt them like small waves of warmth every time they happened. Sarah, sitting in a side chair with her laptop, also noticed. She had known Michael Johnson for 20 years, since he was just an ambitious junior analyst with big dreams and even bigger determination. She had seen him build the company from the ground up, witnessed his happy marriage to Helena, and saw his world collapse when she died in a car accident 5 years ago. And since then, she had seen him transform into a work machine, emotionally shutting down to everything and everyone. Until now. Sarah watched fascinated as Michael occasionally lost his train of thought in his explanations when his eyes landed on Emily. She saw him grip the pen more tightly, noticed the slight tightening of his jaw, and observed how he unconsciously straightened his tie every time he spoke in her direction. They were tiny signs, invisible to anyone who didn't know him intimately. But for Sarah, they were glaring. "Any questions about the methodology presented?" Michael asked at the end of the presentation, and Emily raised her hand before she could stop herself. "Yes, Dr. Johnson. I noticed that the risk analysis for technology investments did not include variables related to regulatory volatility in the sector, especially considering the new SEC guidelines on cryptocurrencies. Shouldn't that be incorporated into the projections?" The silence that followed was deafening. Emily realized too late that she might have been too bold on her first day, questioning an established methodology. James, beside her, shot her a look that mixed surprise and something that seemed like admiration. Sarah held her breath. But then Michael smiled. It wasn't a full smile, just a slight curve at the corners of his lips, but it was enough to momentarily light up his face. Emily took a deep breath to dispel the shadow of sadness she carried. "Excellent observation, Emily. Indeed, this variable was discussed in previous meetings, but ended up being postponed to the next quarterly review due to a lack of consolidated data. But you are right, it should be prioritized. Sarah, please schedule a meeting with the risk analysis team for next week. And—" He paused, looking directly at Emily with an intensity that made her stomach churn. "I would like you to lead this discussion. Prepare a preliminary report by Thursday." "Yes, sir. It will be a pleasure," Emily replied, keeping her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions. The meeting was adjourned and the executives began to disperse. James immediately turned to her. "Impressive, Emily, on your first day, and you already got a mission straight from the CEO. You're brave." "Or reckless," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "Let me give you a tip." James leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Dr. Johnson may seem approachable, but he is extremely controlling. Every detail matters to him. If you're going to work directly with him, be prepared for your work to be dissected down to the last decimal. I have no problem with perfectionism. In fact, I prefer it that way. Emily replied, grabbing her folder and standing up. "Great, then I guess we'll be seeing a lot of each other around here. My department also reports directly to him." James smiled again, and Emily confirmed her initial impression. There was something false about that smile. "How about we have lunch together one of these days? I can give you more tips on how the culture works here." "Thanks, James, but I usually eat at my desk. I prefer to use the time to get ahead on work," she replied politely but firmly. As she walked toward the exit, Emily felt that weight of a gaze again. She instinctively turned and found Michael still standing at the head of the table, watching her with an expression she couldn't fully decipher. There was interest, yes, but also something deeper, something that seemed almost desperate. Sarah approached her in the hallway. "Dear, let me show you your workstation and introduce you to the rest of the team. You made an excellent first impression." "Thank you, Sarah. I hope to meet expectations," Emily smiled, genuinely grateful for the older woman's kindness. "Oh, I'm sure you will," Sarah replied, and there was an enigmatic sparkle in her eyes. "I'm absolutely certain." What Emily didn't know, as she was guided through the halls of the Johnson Investment Group on that hot January morning, was that her life was about to change in ways she could never imagine, and that the man who had watched her so intensely in that meeting room was, at that very moment, locked in his office, trying to understand why the simple act of seeing her had awakened something inside him that had been buried for 5 long years. Michael Johnson rested his hands on the solid mahogany desk and took a deep breath, trying to regain the control that had always been his trademark. But control, for the first time in a long time, seemed to be slipping through his fingers like sand. The wall clock read 6:40 in the evening when Emily finally allowed herself to stretch her back in the ergonomic chair at her new workstation. The office had emptied considerably in the last hour. Most employees left the building between 5:30 and 6, taking the opportunity to escape the chaotic traffic that turned Fifth Avenue into a giant parking lot at the end of the workday. She massaged her temples with her fingertips, feeling the weight of the last 12 hours. Her first day had been an avalanche of information. Internal systems, security protocols, endless presentations on analysis methodologies, a quick lunch with the junior analysts who looked at her with a mix of respect and curiosity, and, of course, the task that Michael Johnson had assigned her during the morning meeting. The preliminary report on regulatory volatility in the technology sector was open on her screen, with endless tabs of research, graphs, and spreadsheets. Emily had always been meticulous in her work. It was her way of proving that she deserved to be in any environment, regardless of the adversities she faced. But there was something different about this specific task. She felt an internal pressure to impress, to show that the trust placed in her was not a mistake. "Still here, dear?" Sarah's voice made her look up. The executive assistant was holding a steaming cup of coffee and smiling with that maternal expression that was already becoming familiar. "I thought I'd find the floor empty." "Oh, Sarah, yes, I was just organizing some ideas for the report. I want to start off well tomorrow morning," Emily replied, saving the document and beginning to shut down her computer. "May I?" Sarah pointed to the chair next to Emily's workstation. Upon receiving a nod, she sat down with the grace of someone who already knew every inch of that office. "You know, I've worked with Dr. Johnson for 20 years. I've seen this company grow, go through crises and triumphs, and I've learned to read the people who work here." Emily felt a slight tightening in her stomach. There was something in the way Sarah spoke that suggested the conversation was about to take a more personal turn. "You remind me of someone," Sarah continued, taking a sip of her coffee. "A strong, determined woman who doesn't accept less than she deserves. Helena, Dr. Johnson's wife, was like that." "Was?" Emily asked softly, noticing the use of the past tense. "She passed away 5 years ago. Car accident on the marginal Pinheiros. Sarah said, her voice heavy with genuine sadness. She was coming back from a volunteer meeting. Helena was special. She lit up any room she entered. And Dr. Johnson loved her in a way that, well, you don't see often. When she died, something in him died too. Emily felt a lump in her throat. Suddenly, the shadow of sadness she had perceived in Michael's eyes during the morning meeting made perfect sense. She threw herself into work, Sarah continued, looking at the cup in her hands as if she were seeing memories reflected in the dark liquid. He started working 18 hours a day. He turned the company into a market giant, but the personal cost was high. He completely shut himself off. He no longer goes out with friends, doesn't travel unless it's for work, and shows no interest in anything other than numbers and strategies. I worry about him. I've tried in various ways to help him start living again, but he just builds higher walls. Sarah, I appreciate you sharing this with me, but why are you telling me? Emily asked, although part of her already knew the answer. The older woman smiled, and there was a glimmer of hope in her tired eyes. Because today, for the first time in 5 years, I saw a crack in those walls. During the meeting, when he looked at you... She paused, as if carefully choosing her words. It was like watching a man who was drowning finally surface for air. And I know you felt something too. I saw how you reacted when he gave you that task. Sarah, with all due respect, I just got out of a disastrous marriage. I have a daughter who depends on me, a career to build. The last thing I need is complications, Emily said firmly, but her voice trembled slightly, because, as much as she tried to deny it, she had indeed felt something in that meeting room, something that scared her deeply. I know, dear, and I'm not suggesting anything inappropriate. I'm just saying that sometimes the best things in life come exactly when we're not looking for them. And sometimes the right person shows up at the right time to heal wounds we thought were permanent. Sarah stood up, leaving the empty cup on the table. But you're right to be cautious. Dr. Johnson is a complex man, and this corporate environment doesn't forgive judgment errors. After Sarah left, Emily sat in silence for a few minutes, processing the conversation. She picked up her phone and saw 3 messages from Mrs. Smith. A photo of Sophie having dinner, another of the girl already in pajamas brushing her teeth, and a final one, saying, "She's sleeping. You can pick her up before lunch tomorrow. Rest, dear. The first day is always heavy." Emily smiled, missing her daughter, even though she had only been apart for 12 hours. She typed a quick reply, thanking her mother and promising to pick up Sophie early. Then she grabbed her bag, turned off the lights at her station, and walked toward the elevators. The hallway was quiet, illuminated only by emergency lights that cast long shadows on the walls. Her footsteps echoed on the marble floor, and she was so lost in thought that she almost collided with someone as she turned the corner. "Sorry, I didn't see," she started, and then realized who she had bumped into. Gabriel Johnson was standing there, his blazer casually draped over his shoulder, and his tie loosened. It was the first time she had seen him in anything less than completely formal, and the effect was unsettling. He looked more human this way, more approachable, and infinitely more attractive. "Emily," he said her name as if testing how it sounded in his voice. "Still here? It's almost 7. I was organizing some ideas for the report. You're also leaving late," she replied, hating how her voice sounded slightly shaky. "I always leave late," he said simply. "In fact, sometimes I don't leave at all. I have a sofa in my office for when the night turns into early morning, and it doesn't make sense to go home." There was a deep loneliness in those words that tightened Emily's heart. She thought of Sophie sleeping snugly at her grandmother's house, waiting to see her mother the next day. She thought about how, despite all the difficulties, she had something precious waiting for her at home. And then she looked at the Man in front of her and wondered what he had waiting for him, besides an empty apartment. "Dr. Johnson, may I ask you a question?" She spoke before she could stop herself. "Gabriel," he gently corrected. "When we're not in formal meetings, you can call me Gabriel. And yes, you can ask. Why did you give me that task? I'm new here, barely know the internal systems, and you have senior analysts who have been here for years. Why me?" Gabriel was silent for a long moment, and Emily could see the conflict unfolding behind those dark eyes. Finally, he answered, "Because when you made that observation during the meeting, I saw something I haven't seen in a long time in this company. I saw someone who truly cares about doing the job right, not just doing the job that will please the superiors. I saw intelligence without arrogance, confidence without hubris, and because—" He paused, and Emily had the impression he was about to say something much more personal, but then he simply concluded, "And because I trust my instincts about people, and my instincts tell me you're going to do an exceptional job. I'll do my best." "Not to disappoint," Emily said, aware that they were standing very close to each other in the dark hallway. "I know you will," Gabriel replied, and then did something completely unexpected. He extended his hand, not for a formal business handshake, but in a more casual, personal way. "Welcome to the team, Emily. Truly." She took his hand, and the touch sent a wave of electricity up her arm. Gabriel's hand was warm, firm, and he held hers for just a second longer than would be appropriate, long enough for both to feel that something was forming between them, something dangerous and inevitable. "Thank you, Gabriel," she said softly, and saw the effect his name had on him, the way his eyes widened slightly, as if the breathing became a bit heavier, something stirred inside her. They separated and walked to the elevators in silence. The ride down to the ground floor was tense, both pretending to look at the numbers descending on the digital panel, both hyper-aware of each other's presence in that confined space. When the doors finally opened in the main lobby, it was almost a relief. "Are you driving?" Michael asked as they walked toward the exit, where the sleepy night security guard waved. "No, I took the subway. I'll pick up my car at Fifth Avenue Station," Emily replied. "Let me give you a ride." "It's not safe at this hour," he offered, and before she could protest, he added, "Please, I won't be able to sleep knowing I let you take public transport alone at 7 in the evening." Emily knew she should refuse. She knew that accepting a ride from the CEO on her first day of work was far from ideal. But there was something in his voice, a vulnerability, hidden beneath the request, that made her agree. "Okay. Thank you." His car was a sleek black BMW, elegant but not overly ostentatious. The interior smelled of genuine leather and a subtle masculine fragrance that Emily couldn't identify but found incredibly pleasant. Michael opened the passenger door for her before walking around to the driver's side. "Where to?" he asked, starting the engine that purred softly. "Brooklyn, near the subway," she informed him, and she saw surprise briefly pass over his face. It was quite a distance from the upscale Fifth Avenue area. "I live with my mother, temporarily," she added, feeling the need to explain. "I'm saving money to rent an apartment for myself and my daughter." "You have a daughter," Michael said, not as a question, but as a statement. He obviously already knew. He had read her resume, perhaps even did some deeper research on her before hiring. "Sophie, 7 years old. She's the reason I wake up every day and fight to be better," Emily replied, and there was so much pride and love in her voice that it was impossible not to notice. Michael exited the garage and took Fifth Avenue toward the east. River. The traffic was heavy but flowing, a river of red lights stretching ahead. For a few minutes they drove in silence, a silence that was surprisingly comfortable. "Sarah told me about your wife," Emily said suddenly, surprising herself with her boldness. "I'm sorry for your loss." She saw his hands tighten on the steering wheel, the knuckles turning white. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't respond. But then he spoke, and there was a raw pain in his voice. Helena was everything. We were married for 12 years. We met in college, built this company together. She didn't work directly with me, but she was my advisor, my conscience. When she died, he paused, and Emily could see the internal struggle he was having to continue. When she died, it was like someone turned off all the lights, and I spent the last 5 years stumbling in the dark. I understand, Emily said softly. Not in the same way, of course. My divorce was very different from losing someone you loved. But I understand the feeling of having to rebuild your life piece by piece, of waking up every day and having to choose to go on even when it seems impossible. Michael glanced at her briefly before returning his eyes to the traffic, and there was something new in his gaze. Recognition, understanding, connection. Your ex-husband is an idiot, he said suddenly, and the comment was so unexpected that Emily let out a genuine laugh. How do you know? I haven't said anything about him. Any man who lets a woman like you go is, by definition, a complete idiot, Michael replied, and there was an intensity in his voice that made her heart race dangerously. A woman like me? She asked, almost whispering. Michael entered the East River Parkway, the city lights reflecting on the dark waters of the river. He took his time responding, as if he were choosing each word carefully. Strong, intelligent, determined. Beautiful, he paused. Especially beautiful. The air inside the car seemed to grow denser. Emily knew she should say something, set boundaries, remind them both that he was her boss and she was his subordinate. But the words died in her throat when their eyes met again, and she saw in them a desire so intense that it left her breathless. Michael, she began, but she didn't know how to finish the sentence. I'm sorry, he said quickly, returning his eyes to the road. That was inappropriate. You work for me, and I shouldn't. I'm sorry. No, Emily replied, surprising them both. Don't apologize for being honest. I felt something today too, during the meeting, and it scared me. Why? His voice was almost a whisper. Because I can't afford to feel things. Not now. I have a daughter who depends on me, a career I need to build, and you're my boss. It's an impossible situation. I know, Michael agreed, but there was palpable frustration in his voice. Believe me, I know. I spent the whole day trying to convince myself that what I felt when I saw you was just professional admiration. But that would be a lie. They arrived in Brooklyn, and Emily pointed out the street where her mother lived. Michael parked in front of a simple, middle-class building painted a faded yellow. It was a stark contrast to the luxury world of Fifth Avenue. Thank you for the ride, Emily said, grabbing her bag but not making any move to exit the car. Emily, Michael turned fully to her, and the expression on his face was that of someone battling a violent internal struggle. I don't do this. I don't get involved with employees. I don't mix personal and professional life. I build high walls to protect myself from feeling anything. But you, in just one day, you managed to tear down walls that I took 5 years to build. And that terrifies me as much as it awakens me. What are you saying? She asked, although she knew exactly what he was saying. I'm saying I don't know what to do with what I'm feeling. I'm saying I know I should keep my distance, that I should treat you like I treat any other employee, but I'm also saying that, he took a deep breath, that I don't know if I can. The silence that followed was heavy with possibilities and dangers. Emily knew that the next move would define everything. Her future at the company, her relationship with Gabriel, perhaps even the course of her entire life. Then don't try, she finally said, surprising herself with her boldness. Don't try to keep your distance, but also don't try anything else, not yet. Let things happen naturally, without forcing, without hasty decisions. Can we do that? Gabriel looked at her for a long moment, and then a small, genuine smile curved his lips. "We can, but you need to know one thing, Emily." "What?" "I'm not good at letting things happen naturally. I'm controlling, obsessive, and when I want something, I usually go after it with everything I've got. So this is going to be new for me." "Well," Emily opened the car door and looked back at him over her shoulder, a slight smile playing on her lips. "Then it will be a learning experience for both of us. Good night, Gabriel." "Good night, Emily." She got out of the car and walked to the entrance of the building, feeling his eyes on her back with every step. When she finally entered the lobby and looked through the glass window, the BMW was still there, parked. Gabriel hadn't left until he was sure she was safe, and as she climbed the stairs to her third-floor apartment, Emily wondered exactly what she had just gotten herself into, because no matter how much she tried to rationalize, she couldn't deny the fundamental truth. In just one day, Gabriel Johnson had become infinitely more than just her boss, and that, she knew with absolute certainty, would change everything. The next 30 days were a delicate dance between professionalism and an unspoken tension that hung in the air like electricity before a storm. Emily arrived every day at 7:30 in the morning, after dropping Sophie off at the local school near Mrs. Smith's house, and dove into work with a determination that impressed even the most seasoned analysts. The report on regulatory volatility that Gabriel had commissioned on her first day turned into a 40-page document, meticulously researched and grounded. She spent sleepless nights refining every graph, checking every source, anticipating every possible question. When she finally delivered it, a week ahead of schedule, Gabriel summoned her for a private meeting in his office. "Come in, Emily. Close the door, please," he said when she appeared in the doorway, wearing a navy blue dress that subtly hugged her curves and medium heels that made her legs look even longer. Gabriel's office was exactly what she would expect. Spacious, with a spectacular view of the city, decorated with dark wood and leather furniture. But there were personal touches that humanized the space. A framed photo of a smiling blonde woman who could only be Helena, some philosophy books on the shelves next to management manuals, and a surprisingly well-kept fern in the corner. "Have a seat, please." He gestured to one of the leather armchairs in front of his desk. She sat down, crossing her legs and placing a folder over her lap as a protective shield. Gabriel picked up the printed report from his desk. She could see the margins filled with notes in his firm, angular handwriting. "This report is," he began, flipping through the pages, and Emily felt her stomach tighten. "It's exceptional, Emily. It's not just good, it's exceptional. You not only identified the gaps in our methodology, but you also proposed viable, well-founded and innovative solutions. I'm going to present this to the board at the next quarterly meeting." She felt an immense relief wash over her, followed by a wave of genuine pride. "Thank you, Gabriel. That means a lot to me." "You deserve it," he said, setting the report aside and leaning back in his chair, fingers intertwined over his abdomen as he studied her with that intensity that was already becoming familiar. "Actually, I want to make you a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" she asked, and her voice came out a little huskier than she intended. "Professional," he clarified quickly, but there was a playful glint in his eyes that suggested he had noticed her tone. "I want to promote you to Strategic Analysis Coordinator. It would be a new position, created specifically to lead high-impact projects like this one. You would report directly to me." Emily felt her heart race, but it wasn't just professional excitement. It was the understanding of what that promotion really meant. Hours of working side by side with Gabriel, frequent private meetings, potential travel for presentations in other cities. It was an incredible opportunity, but it was also dangerous. "Gabriel, I greatly appreciate the trust, but I need to be honest. I'm afraid people will think this promotion has to do with other things. I've only been here for a month. And in that month, you've produced more quality work than some analysts do in a year, he replied firmly, leaning forward. Emily, I understand your concern, but you need to stop underestimating your abilities. You deserve this promotion on your own merits, and if anyone insinuates otherwise, they'll have to answer to me. There was a fierce protectiveness in his voice that stirred something in Emily's chest. David had never defended her like that. He had never acknowledged her efforts, never valued her professionally. And here was Gabriel, offering not just an opportunity, but genuine validation. "Can I think about it until tomorrow?" she asked. "Of course. But Emily," he called as she stood to leave. Emily took a deep breath, trying to clarify. This offer was purely professional. She wasn't trying to manipulate him into staying close to her. Although, he paused, a crooked smile curving his lips. "Although I won't pretend it wouldn't be a pleasant bonus." She felt her face heat up and couldn't help but let out a small smile. "You're impossible, you know." "I've been called worse," he replied, and for the first time since they met, their conversation felt light, almost flirtatious. That night, Emily had a long conversation with Rachel, her best friend since college. Rachel was 45, divorced, a labor lawyer, and one of the most pragmatic people Emily knew. They met at a bar in Brooklyn, sitting at a worn wooden table, surrounded by the buzz of conversations and the smell of fried snacks. "Let me see if I got this right," Rachel said, after taking a generous sip of her margarita. "Your handsome and emotionally available CEO wants to promote you, pay you more, and is clearly in love with you. And you're worried." "Rach, it's not that simple," Emily protested, poking her margarita with the straw. "He's my boss, and there's something called professional ethics." Professional ethics are important, yes. But do you know what else is important? Happiness, opportunity, and for God's sake, Emily, sex. When was the last time you... Rachel. Emily. Un cut her off, laughing despite herself. "That's not the issue." "It's not?" Rachel raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Then what is? Because from where I'm standing, you have a golden opportunity here. Professionally, it's obvious you should accept. You're good at what you do, and this promotion is well-deserved. And personally, Emily, you've spent 3 years rebuilding your life. 3 years focused solely on Sophie and your career. You deserve to be happy too." "But what if it goes wrong? What if I accept this promotion, we get involved, and then everything blows up? I'll lose my job, my reputation, and Sophie will suffer the consequences." Emily expressed the fear that kept her awake at night. Rachel became serious, taking Emily's hand across the table. "Emily, look at me. You're the strongest woman I know. You rebuilt your life from scratch after that worm David betrayed you. You raised Sophie alone, finished an MBA, landed an amazing job. You've survived worse things than a relationship going wrong. And besides..." She squeezed Emily's hand. "You deserve to have someone who looks at you the way you described that man looks at you. Someone who values you, respects you, who truly sees you." Emily felt tears prick her eyes. Because Rachel was right. It had been so long since she denied herself any possibility of romantic happiness, so focused on being a mother and a professional, that she had forgotten she was also a woman with desires and needs. "I'm scared," she admitted softly. "I know, but sometimes the best things in life are on the other side of fear." The next day, Emily accepted the promotion. The news spread through the office like wildfire. There were genuine congratulations from some, eloquent silences from others, and speculative looks from many. James Carter, the marketing manager who had shown interest in her since day one, appeared in her new office, Yes, now she had her own office with a door and everything, with a bouquet of flowers. "Congratulations, coordinator," he said with that smile she was increasingly suspicious of. "You moved up fast, huh? Barely got here and you're already almost at the top." "Thank you, James," she replied politely, ignoring the veiled insinuation. "But I still have a long way to go." Sure. Look, I was thinking, how about we celebrate? There's a happy hour tomorrow in Brooklyn. Several of the team are going. It would be a great opportunity for you to integrate more. And—" he leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Between us, it would also be good for you to show up at company social events. It shows you're part of the team, you know? Not just someone who stays locked in the office with the boss." There was poison in those words, disguised as friendly advice. Emily felt anger rise in her throat, but she kept her face neutral. "I'll think about it. Thanks for the invitation." When he left, she closed the door and leaned against it, closing her eyes. So this is how it would be. Every achievement questioned, every decision analyzed under the lens of suspicion. And the worst part was that she couldn't even completely deny the insinuations, because there was indeed something between her and Gabriel, something unconsummated, something undefined, but definitely something. "Problems." Gabriel's voice made her open her eyes. He was standing in the doorway. She hadn't heard him knock. He wore black dress pants and a white shirt, with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing muscular forearms and an expensive watch on his left wrist. "Nothing I can't handle," she replied, straightening up. "I saw James leaving here. Did he bother you?" There was a tension in his jaw that didn't go unnoticed. "He invited me to a happy hour and made some suggestive comments about my promotion." Gabriel's eyes darkened dangerously. "What kind of comments?" Gabriel let it go. "I knew this would happen. It comes with the territory." "No." He entered the room and closed the door behind him, and suddenly the space felt much smaller. "It doesn't come with the territory. You were promoted because you're exceptional at what you do. And if anyone, James or anyone else, insinuates otherwise, I'll make it very clear that they're being sued for defamation." "You can't go around threatening to sue everyone who gossips, Gabriel. That will only make things worse," Emily argued, but there was a part of her that felt warmed by his fierce protection. "So what do you suggest I do? Should I just sitting here while they destroy your reputation?" There was genuine frustration in her voice. "Do you trust me?" she suddenly asked. "Completely." "Then trust that I know how to handle this. I've dealt with worse. Office gossip isn't going to break me." She moved closer to him, and the proximity made the air between them heat up. "But I need to ask you something." "Anything." "We need to be more careful. People are already speculating. If you keep defending me publicly every time someone says something, it will only confirm their suspicions." David closed his eyes, clearly struggling against the instinct to protect her at all costs. "I hate this. I hate having to pretend that you're just another employee when—" He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. "I know," she said, softly. "I do too, but it has to be this way. For now." "For now," he repeated, opening his eyes and fixing them on her with an intensity that made her knees weak. "And then, I don't know. We'll figure it out as we go." He nodded slowly and then did something completely unexpected. He raised his hand and, with extreme gentleness, brushed a strand of hair that had fallen over her face, his fingers lightly grazing her cheek in the process. The touch was so brief, so subtle, that it could be considered accidental, but they both knew it wasn't. "You're amazing, you know that," he murmured. "You're not so bad yourself," she replied, allowing herself to smile. The moment was broken by the buzz of her phone. Emily looked at the screen and saw a message from Mrs. Smith. "Sophie has a fever, 11.3. I think you should come pick her up." Emily's blood ran cold. "I need to go," she said immediately, already grabbing her bag. "Sophie is sick. Go. Go now, and keep me updated, please," David said, opening the door for her. "Thank you," she rushed past him, but then stopped and looked back. "David?" "Yes?" "Thank you for everything." He smiled, and there was so much affection in that smile that it made her heart tighten. Always. Emily took an Uber to her mother's house, the 40-minute ride feeling like an eternity. When she finally arrived, she found Sophie lying on the couch, covered with a blanket, her little face flushed with fever and her eyes shimmering with tears. "Mommy!" The girl stretched out her arms, and Emily picked her up, feeling the excessive heat radiating from her small body. "My love, Mommy is here. We're going to take you to the doctor, okay? She's been complaining of a sore throat since she woke up," Mrs. Smith explained, concern etched on her face. "It must be one of the viruses going around among the kids." They went to the nearest clinic, and the next few hours were a blur of waiting room, pediatrician, diagnosis of tonsillitis, and pharmacy. When they finally returned home, it was already 9 at night, and Sophie was drowsy from fever medicine and antibiotics, sleeping soundly in Emily's arms. She placed her daughter in bed, adjusted the blankets, kissed her still slightly warm forehead, and quietly left the room. The living room. She finally allowed herself to crumble a bit, the weight of the day falling on her shoulders. Her phone vibrated. A message from David. "How is she?" Emily felt tears prick her eyes. He had remembered. He cared enough to ask even hours later. "Tonsillitis, but she'll be fine. Thank you for asking." The reply came almost immediately. "I'm glad it's something treatable. Do you need anything? I can order food delivery, medicine, anything." "I'm fine, but thank you, really. Emily." "Yes?" "You're an amazing mother. Sophie is lucky to have you." She couldn't hold back the tears that finally streamed down, because it had been so long since anyone recognized how hard she worked, how difficult it was to balance everything alone. And David, in just a few words, had seen that. "Thank you. That means more than you know. Rest. I'll see you when you can come back. No rush." That night, lying next to Sophie, listening to her daughter's soft breathing, Emily made a decision. She had spent 3 years afraid to feel, afraid to trust, afraid to allow herself to be vulnerable again. But David was slowly, gently breaking down each of her walls. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop fighting against it, because for the first time in a long time, she was starting to believe that she might deserve to be happy, and that maybe, just maybe, David was the man who could help her remember what it was like to live, not just survive. June arrived, bringing with it the characteristic chill of New York winters and the traditional company picnic of the Johnson Investment Group. The company had rented a farm in New Jersey, about 60 miles from the city, and practically all employees were invited to bring their families. It was an annual event that served both for socializing and for strengthening the company's organizational culture. Emily initially hesitated to go. The idea of spending an entire Saturday in a social environment with co-workers, especially with the gossip still circulating about her rapid promotion, wasn't exactly appealing. But Sophie, upon hearing about horses, bonfires and popcorn, begged so much that it was impossible to refuse. "Mommy, please! I've never been to a real farm. The teacher said there are horses and everything." The girl's brown eyes sparkled with anticipation. "Princess, I don't know if it's a good idea. There will be a lot of your mum's co-workers, and you might get bored," Emily tried to argue, but she already knew she was fighting a losing battle. "I promise I'll behave super well. Please, Mommy, please, please, please." And that's how, on Saturday morning, Emily found herself driving the used Honda Civic she had bought the previous month, finally managing to save enough to have her own car, heading towards New Jersey with Sophie humming songs from Frozen in the back seat. The farm was even more beautiful than Emily imagined, an old farmhouse tastefully restored, surrounded by green pastures, where a few horses grazed peacefully. There were colourful banners hanging between the trees, food stalls scattered across the lawn, a huge bonfire already lit in the centre of a designated area, and country music playing from strategically placed speakers. "Wow!" Sophie exclaimed as she got out of the car, her wide eyes absorbing every detail. "Mom, look at the horses. Can I go see?" "Hold on, Princess. Let's first check out where everything is, okay?" Emily held her daughter's hand, feeling slightly out of place in her floral cotton dress and flat sandals. It was one of the few times she wasn't in professional attire around her colleagues. "Emily, you made it!" Sarah suddenly appeared, wearing a plaid shirt tied around her waist and a colourful skirt, fully dressed for the party. Beside her was a tall, friendly man, probably her husband. "And this beautiful princess must be Sophie." "Hi," Sophie replied shyly, hiding a bit behind her mother. "Sophie, this is Mrs. Thompson. She works with me. Sarah, this is my daughter." Emily made the introductions. "Nice to meet you, Sophie. Look, there's a fishing booth for the kids over there, and later there will be a dance performance. You're going to love it." Sarah crouched down to Sophie's level, speaking with that maternal kindness that made any child feel at ease. "Really? Mom, can I go?" Sophie looked at Emily with those pleading eyes she could never resist. "Of course, Princess. But stay close, okay?" As Sophie ran toward the game booths, Sarah stood up and shot a meaningful glance at Emily. "He's over there," she said softly, discreetly nodding toward an area near the main house. "And he seems different today, more relaxed. I think it's the first time in years I've seen him truly unwind." Emily followed Sarah's gaze and felt her heart skip a beat. Michael was standing near a group of directors, but instead of his usual impeccable suit, he wore dark jeans and a blue plaid shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Without the corporate armor, he looked younger, more approachable. And when he laughed at something someone said, the sound reached Emily even from a distance, making something twist in her stomach. As if sensing her gaze, Michael turned his head in their direction. Their eyes met, and she saw the exact moment his expression changed, the casual smile transforming into something more intense, more personal. He murmured something to the group and began walking toward them. "Well, I guess that's my cue to check if the food is arriving," Sarah said with a knowing smile, quickly stepping away. "Emily." Michael stopped a few steps away from her, and there was something different in the way he said her name. Softer, almost intimate. "I'm glad you came. I wasn't sure if you would." "Sophie convinced me," she replied, trying to keep her tone light despite her racing heart. "She's never been to a farm before." "Is she here?" He looked around, genuinely interested. "Over there," Emily pointed to where Sophie was focused on trying to fish plastic ducks out of a water basin. "The one in the yellow dress." Michael watched the girl for a moment, and there was such a tender expression on his face that made Emily's heart tighten. "She's beautiful. She has your eyes," he commented, and then surprisingly asked, "Do you mind if I go meet her?" Emily hesitated for just a second. Introducing Michael to Sophie was a significant step, a tacit admission that he was more than just her boss. But something in the way he asked, respectful, almost hesitant, made her agree. "Sure, come on." They walked together to the fishing booth, and Emily crouched down beside her daughter. "Princess, I want to introduce you to someone. This is Dr. Michael. He works with me." Sophie looked up from the basin, assessing Michael with that brutal honesty of children. Then, to Emily's surprise, she smiled. "Hi. Are you my mom's boss? She talks about you sometimes." Emily felt her face heat up as Michael let out a genuine laugh, also crouching down to be at the girl's level. Talks? And what does she say? That you're very smart and hard-working, and that it's nice to work with you, Sophie replied with the absolute honesty of a 7-year-old. I'm Sophie. I'm 7 years old, and I go to Santos Dumont Municipal School. And you? Nice to meet you, Sophie. I'm Michael. I'm 40 years old and, well, I work a lot, but today I'm trying to have some fun too. He extended his hand formally, and Sophie shook it seriously, clearly feeling important. Do you know how to fish for ducks? I already caught 3. She proudly showed the plastic. Ducks she had won. No, I've never tried. Will you teach me? And that's how Emily found herself watching Michael Johnson, CEO of one of the largest investment firms in the country, crouched next to her 7-year-old daughter, awkwardly trying to fish for plastic ducks with a magnetic rod, while Sophie laughed and gave instructions. No, Uncle Michael, you have to go slower, otherwise the ducks will swim away, Sophie instructed with exaggerated patience. Uncle Michael. He had automatically accepted the title Sophie had given him, and there was something so natural about that interaction that made Emily's eyes burn with unshed tears. I got one, Michael exclaimed when he finally hooked a duck, and Sophie clapped enthusiastically. You're good at this. Want to try again? They stayed there for a few more minutes until another child joined the game, and Sophie quickly became absorbed in a new friendship. Michael stood up, wiping his hands. In his jeans, he looked at Emily with an expression she couldn't fully decipher. She's amazing, he simply said. She's my whole life, Emily replied, and there was so much truth in those words that it didn't need elaboration. I know, and that's why, he paused, as if carefully choosing his words. That's why I understand that everything happening between us needs to be considered not just in terms of us two. She comes first. Always. Emily felt something break and rebuild simultaneously within her. Because Gabriel wasn't just acknowledging that she was a mother, he was prioritizing Sophie, putting the girl's well-being above his own desires. And that meant more than any romantic declaration could. Thank you for understanding that. Always, he said, and there was a promise in that single word. The afternoon progressed in a succession of activities and interactions. There was lunch with typical foods, barbecue chicken, corn pudding, hot cider for the adults, and hot chocolate for the kids. Sophie was having the time of her life, running between the booths, making new friends, and riding a gentle pony under careful supervision. Gabriel, Emily noticed, always seemed to be nearby. Not in an obvious or intrusive way, but he was there. When Sophie ran back to show a drawing she had made, when she needed help reaching the popcorn at the booth, when she wanted to see the horses up close but was afraid to get too close. Uncle Gabriel, do you know how to ride a horse? Sophie asked during the afternoon, looking admiringly at a brown horse grazing near the fence. I do. I learned when I was a boy. Why? He replied, crouching down beside her. I really want to ride a real horse, but I'm a little scared, she admitted, biting her lower lip in a way that was identical to what Emily did when she was nervous. Gabriel looked at Emily, silently asking for permission. She hesitated. The idea of Sophie on such a large animal made her nervous, but then saw the excitement in her daughter's eyes and nodded. How about I ride with you? That way you'll be safe and I'll control the horse, Gabriel offered, and Sophie nearly jumped with excitement. Really? Mum, can I? Please. You can, but be careful, okay? Emily agreed, her heart tight between fear and gratitude. She watched as Gabriel spoke with the caretaker responsible for the horses, mounted with surprising ease, and then extended his arms to lift Sophie. The girl was carefully hoisted up, sitting in front of him in the saddle, her eyes wide with excitement and a bit of fear. Gabriel wrapped a firm arm around her, holding the reins with the other hand. Ready? He asked, and Sophie nodded vigorously. They took a slow lap around the enclosed pasture, Sophie laughing and waving to Emily every second. And Emily, watching that scene, the man who was slowly winning her heart, taking care of her daughter with such kindness and attention, felt her defenses finally crumble completely. They make a beautiful picture, don't they? James Carter's voice behind her made her stiffen. She turned and found him watching Gabriel and Sophie with an expression she couldn't fully decipher. "It's kind of him to spend time with her," Emily replied cautiously. "Kind," James repeated, and there was something sharp in his tone. "It's an interesting word. Dr. Johnson has never been particularly known for his kindness, especially not with employees' children. In fact, this is the first company picnic he's attended in 5 years." "What's your point, James?" Emily asked, tired of the insinuations. "No point, just an observation," he shrugged, but then leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "Look, Emily, you seem like a nice person, smart, hard-working, so I'll give you a friend's advice. Be careful. Gabriel Johnson may seem like a gentleman, but he's known for being obsessive. When he wants something, he doesn't stop until he gets it, and when he does—" He left the sentence hanging, loaded with implications. "Thanks for your concern, but I can take care of myself," Emily replied coldly. "I'm sure you can." "I just hope you also know how to take care of your daughter," James said, and then walked away before she could respond. His words echoed in Emily's mind for the rest of the afternoon, planting seeds of doubt that she desperately tried to ignore. Was she being reckless? Was she putting Sophie in a vulnerable situation by allowing Gabriel to get so close? That night, when the bonfire was lit and people gathered around it to sing country songs and roast marshmallows, Sophie finally succumbed to the day's fatigue. She was sitting in Emily's lap, struggling to keep her eyes open, when Gabriel approached. "Do you want me to help carry her to the car?" he kindly offered. "No, thank you. I can manage," Emily replied, her tone coming out colder than she intended. Gabriel frowned, noticing the change. "Did something happen?" "No, I'm just tired. It's been a long day." She carefully stood up, adjusting Sophie in her arms. "Emily," he lightly touched her arm, making her stop. "I know that look. Someone said something to you. Was it James?" She hesitated, and that was answer enough. "What did he say?" Gabriel's voice was dangerously low. "Nothing important. Just, Gabriel, I need to go. Sophie needs to sleep." "Dance with me first," he said suddenly. "What?" "A song. Dance a song with me before you go," he insisted, and there was something almost desperate in his voice. Emily looked at Sophie, who was almost completely asleep, and then at Gabriel. Against her better judgment, she agreed. "Sarah?" Gabriel called the assistant, who was nearby. "Can you hold Sophie for a minute? She's sleeping." Sarah carefully took the girl, and Emily allowed Gabriel to guide her. As they moved to the improvised dance area near the fire pit, the music playing was a slow, romantic country tune. When he placed one hand on her waist and took her other hand, Emily felt her heart race. They swayed slowly, the warmth of the fire heating one side, while the cool night breeze chilled the other. Gabriel pulled her a little closer, and Emily could feel the heat radiating from him, the scent of his cologne mingling with the smoke from the firewood. "What did James say?" he asked again, his deep voice vibrating against her ear. "That you're obsessive, that when you want something, you don't stop until you get it," she replied honestly, deciding it was pointless to lie. "He's right," Gabriel admitted, surprising her. "I am obsessive. I always have been. It's part of what made me successful in business. But with you—" He paused, and Emily felt his breath against her. "With you it's different. It's not about conquering or possessing, it's about awakening. You made me feel things I thought I had buried with Helena, and that terrifies me as much as it completes me." Emily looked up to meet his gaze and saw raw vulnerability there. "Gabriel, I'm scared," she admitted softly. "Scared of giving in, and it ending up hurting not just me, but Sophie. She's already attached to you today, I saw. What if things go wrong?" "They won't," he interrupted with fierce conviction. "I won't let that happen. Emily, I can't promise that I know what I'm doing, because it's been so long since I allowed myself to feel anything like this. But I can promise that I will protect you and Sophie with everything I have. I can promise that I will never, ever put you in a position where you could get hurt because of me." Before Emily could respond, James appeared out of nowhere, clearly affected by the hot apple cider he had consumed throughout the afternoon. "Sorry to interrupt this intimate moment," he said, his voice slurred and laden with sarcasm, "but we need to talk about the third-quarter marketing project. Dr. Johnson, it's urgent." The change in Gabriel was instantaneous and frightening. The kind and vulnerable man from seconds ago vanished, replaced by something cold and dangerous. He slowly stepped away from Emily, his eyes fixed on James with an intensity that even made her take a step back. "Carter," Gabriel said, his voice so icy it could freeze the air around them, "I strongly suggest you leave now. We are at a social event, and any work-related matters can wait until Monday." Sure. But you know, Dr. Johnson, people are talking," James continued, recklessly fueled by alcohol, "about you and the new coordinator, about favoritism, about things that could be problematic for the company's reputation." Gabriel's jaw clenched, and Emily could see his hands balling into fists. "My office, Monday, 8 in the morning, and I suggest you come sober and prepared to explain yourself," Gabriel said with a deadly calm. "Gabriel, let it go." Emily touched his arm, feeling the muscles tense like steel under her fingers. "It's not worth it." He looked at her, and slowly, very slowly, the tension began to drain from his body. But when he turned his gaze back to James, there was a promise there, a promise of consequences. "You're lucky she asked for mercy," Gabriel told James, "because if it were up to me, you wouldn't have a job on Monday." James paled, finally understanding the gravity of what he had done, and quickly backed away. Gabriel turned back to Emily, and there was a mix of frustration and something darker in his eyes. "I'm sorry. I know you asked me not to defend you publicly, but when he—" "I know," she interrupted, "and part of me is grateful. But Gabriel, you need to control this possessiveness, because he's right about one thing. People are talking, and the more you react like this, the worse it will get." "Are you asking me to stay quiet while they destroy your reputation?" There was disbelief in his voice. "I'm asking you to trust me to handle this my way," she replied firmly. "I'm asking you to understand that sometimes defending me publicly does more harm than good." They stood there, looking at each other in the firelight, the music continuing around them, people dancing and laughing, oblivious to the tension between them. And Emily realized, with crystal clarity, that she was at a crossroads. She could take a step back, protect herself and Sophie, keep things purely professional, or she could take a step forward towards something terrifying and potentially devastating, but also potentially extraordinary. "Will you take me home?" she finally asked, and saw surprise flicker in his eyes. "Sophie, she's sleeping. We can put her in the back seat of your car. Please, Gabriel, just take me home." He nodded, and something in his gaze told her he understood that this was more than just a ride request. It was a choice. It was her choosing to trust him, despite the fears, despite the risks. They picked up Sophie with Sarah, who looked at both of them with a knowing smile, and walked to Gabriel's Tesla. He adjusted the back seat, carefully placed Sophie in, buckled the seatbelt around the sleeping girl, and covered her with a blanket he kept in the car. The drive back to New York City was in silence. but it was a silence charged with possibilities. Gabriel's hand rested on the gear shift, close enough to Emily's leg that she could feel the warmth, but not touching her, a minimal distance that seemed to contain entire universes of unspoken things. When they arrived in Brooklyn, Gabriel parked in front of the building and turned to her. "Emily, She didn't let him finish. Leaning over the center console, she pressed her lips against, in a kiss that contained 3 months of accumulated tension, repressed desire, and denied feelings. Emily was momentarily frozen, shocked. Then he responded, one hand going to the back of her neck, deepening the kiss with an urgency that took the breath from Emily's lungs. It was devastating. It was inevitable. It was everything they had both been denying since that first meeting. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing heavily, and Gabriel's eyes were dark with desire and something deeper. "Emily." He said her name like a prayer. "Don't say anything," she whispered, touching her swollen lips. "Just don't say anything yet. Let me process this." "All right," he agreed, but took her hand and kissed it gently. "But I need you to know one thing." "What?" "There's no going back, not for me. After this kiss, there's absolutely no way I can pretend that you're just another employee. You've become my obsession, Emily, and I will do everything in my power to win you over, the right way, respecting your boundaries, respecting Sophie, but I will win you over." And as she got out of the car, carrying a sleeping Sophie, Emily knew it wasn't just Gabriel who was obsessed, because she too could no longer pretend that she felt only professional respect for him. The game had completely changed, and there was no turning back. The Monday following the company picnic dawned with a damp chill that seemed to penetrate the bones. Emily woke up at 5:30 in the morning, as always, but unlike other days, she couldn't get out of bed immediately. She lay there, staring at the ceiling of the room she shared with Sophie, mentally reliving the kiss in the car. Her fingers instinctively went to her lips, as if they could still feel the warmth and urgency of Gabriel's mouth against hers. 3 days had passed since that moment, and she had spent every waking minute oscillating between panic and an excitement she hadn't felt in years. "Mum, are you okay?" Sophie's sleepy voice pulled her from her thoughts. The girl stirred in bed beside her, opening her eyes and looking at her. Mother with concern. "You look worried." "I'm fine, Princess. Just thinking about work," Emily smiled, pulling the covers away and getting up. "Come on, you need to get ready for school." As she prepared the morning coffee and helped Sophie put on her school uniform, Emily tried to visualize what it would be like to see Gabriel again. They had exchanged only brief messages over the weekend, he asking how she was, she responding politely but distantly, trying to process everything that had happened. "Mom, I really liked Uncle Gabriel," Sophie suddenly commented while eating her cereal. "He's nice. Can he come visit us again?" Emily's heart tightened. That was exactly what she feared, Sophie getting attached to someone who might not be permanent in their lives. "Princess, Uncle Gabriel is very busy. He runs a big company. But he said he enjoyed meeting me, and he said I could call him if I wanted to talk about horses," Sophie insisted, and Emily felt a wave of tenderness and fear simultaneously. Gabriel had given his personal number to Sophie. It was a sweet gesture, but also dangerous, because it meant he was serious about being involved in their lives. At the office, Emily arrived earlier than usual, hoping to dive into work before she had to confront Gabriel. But as she passed the conference room on her way to her office, she heard raised voices coming from inside. One of them was unmistakably Gabriel's. "I will not tolerate this kind of behavior, Carter. You were clearly intoxicated, made inappropriate insinuations about a colleague, and interrupted a private moment with comments that border on harassment. With all due respect, Dr. Johnson, I merely pointed out what everyone in the office is already talking about." Ms. Johnson had a meteoric rise, works directly with you, and now it's clear there's something more between you two. The sound of something hitting the table, probably Gabriel's fist, echoed down the hallway. Choose your next words very carefully, Carter, because depending on what comes out of your mouth now, you might not have a job in 5 minutes. Emily couldn't contain herself. She opened the conference room door, and both men turned to look at her. Gabriel was standing, hands on the table, his face contorted in contained fury. James was sitting across from him, pale but with a defiant expression. "Emily, this isn't—" Gabriel began, but she interrupted him. "It's about me. So I think I have the right to be here," she said firmly, closing the door behind her and walking to stand beside Gabriel, not because she needed his protection, but because she was consciously choosing to stand by him. "James, do you want to know the truth? Yes, there is something between me and Dr. Johnson, but it didn't start until after my promotion. Every achievement I've had in this company has been based solely on my merit and hard work. If you or anyone else has a problem with that, I suggest you review my reports, my performance, and then tell me to my face that I don't deserve to be where I am." James opened his mouth, clearly surprised by the direct confrontation. "Emily, I didn't mean to imply that you aren't competent, but that's exactly what you implied. On Saturday, when you were too drunk to have common sense, and now here. So let me be very clear. My personal life is not your business. My relationship with Dr. Johnson is not your business. What is your business is doing your job and stopping the gossip that harms the reputation of colleagues." Brave, coordinator, but it doesn't change the fact that this is an obvious conflict of interest, and the company's board won't just ignore this when they find out. "When will they find out, exactly?" Gabriel interjected, his voice dangerously low. "Because as far as I know, there's nothing unethical happening here. Mrs. Johnson was promoted based on proven merit. If there's something developing on a personal level between us, it will be handled appropriately within company policies. But you, Carter, have crossed a line by making public insinuations about a relationship that is none of your business. So you admit there's a relationship," James said, a note of triumph in his voice. Emily and Gabriel exchanged a quick glance. They were at a crossroads, denying it would be a lie, but admitting it could have serious professional consequences. "What exists between me and Mrs. Johnson will be addressed transparently with HR and the board when appropriate," Gabriel finally replied. "But we're not discussing this with you. Now, regarding your conduct on Saturday, you are suspended for 3 days without pay. Use this time to reflect on professionalism and appropriate boundaries, and when you return, I expect a change in attitude. Are we clear?" James stood up, his face red with anger and humiliation. "Perfectly clear, Dr. Johnson, but just so you know, I'm not the only one noticing the irregularities. Others are paying attention too." With that, he stormed out of the room, slamming the door hard enough to make the glass tremble. Emily and Gabriel remained silent for a long moment. Then he turned to her, a mix of frustration, admiration, and desire in his eyes. "You shouldn't have come in here." "I know, but I wasn't going to stand outside while you discussed something that directly concerns me," she replied, crossing her arms over her chest. "And we need to talk, Gabriel, about what happened on Saturday, about what he said regarding informing the board, about everything." "I know." He ran a hand through his hair, a look of fatigue briefly passing over his face. "Emily, I didn't plan any of this. I didn't plan to feel this way about you. I didn't plan for you to come into my life and turn everything upside down." "You think I planned this?" she asked, her voice coming out more vulnerable than she intended. "You think I wanted to fall in love with my boss a month after landing my dream job?" The word hung in the air between them. Love. Emily realized too late what she had said and saw the impact it had on Gabriel. He took a step toward her, his intense gaze locked on hers. "Repeat that." "Gabriel, repeat it. Please." There was an urgency in his voice that made her heart race. "I am falling in love with you," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "And it terrifies me. Because I have Sophie to think about, I have my career to protect, and this," she gestured, "between them, this is a huge complication." "The best complication of my life," he said, closing the distance between them and cupping her face in his hands. "Emily, I spent 5 years dead inside. 5 years functioning on autopilot, feeling nothing but emptiness. And then you appeared with your smart eyes and fierce determination and your beautiful daughter, and suddenly I was feeling everything at once. And yes, it's terrifying, and yes, it's complicated, but it's also the only real thing I've felt in a very, very long time. But what about work, and people talking, and the board?" she asked, even as she leaned into his touch. "We'll deal with it. Together. I'll talk to HR today. I'll be transparent about the situation. If necessary, we'll change the reporting structure. You can report to another director. We'll do everything correctly and ethically," he said, and there was a determination in his voice that left no room for doubt. "And what if people keep talking anyway? What if this irreparably damages my reputation?" She voiced her deepest fear. "Then we'll build a new reputation, together. Emily, I won't lie to you. This won't be easy. There will be people judging. There will be gossip. There will be obstacles we can't even imagine yet. But I'm willing to face all of it if you're by my side. The question is, are you?" Emily closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision. Images flashed through her mind, Sophie laughing as Gabriel taught her to fish, the warmth of a kiss in the car, the way he looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world, but also the whispers in the hallways, the speculative glances, the risk of losing everything she had built. "I need guarantees," she finally said, opening her eyes. "Not romantic guarantees. I know no one can promise that a relationship will work, but I need professional guarantees. I need to know that if we don't work out, my job isn't at risk. I need to know you won't punish me professionally if things go south between us personally." "You have my word," he said immediately. "In fact, more than my word. I'll ask HR to draft a formal document guaranteeing your position regardless of the status of our relationship. And I'll put it in writing, signed and witnessed." "Why would you do that?" "Because I want you to feel secure. Because I understand your fears and want to alleviate them as much as possible. And because—" He hesitated, and Emily saw raw vulnerability in his eyes. "Because I'm falling in love with you too, Emily. And when I fall in love, it's with everything. So yes, I will do everything in my power to protect you professionally and personally." Before she could respond, the door opened, and Sarah walked in, stopping abruptly at the sight of them so close together. "Sorry to interrupt, but Dr. Johnson, the board is requesting an emergency meeting. It seems someone raised concerns about a conflict of interest." Gabriel released Emily, but not before briefly squeezing her hand. "James works fast," he murmured. "It's fine, Sarah. Schedule it for an hour from now. And please also call in the HR director. We'll address this head-on." After Sarah left, Emily felt panic begin to rise. "Gabriel, this is happening way too fast. The board is going to demand your head, or mine, or both." "Then they'll have to go through me first," he said with a deadly calm. "Emily, do you trust me?" "Yes." "Then let me handle this. Go to your office, focus on your work. I'll take care of it." But Emily knew it wasn't that simple, and as she walked back to her office, aware of the curious glances from other employees, she wondered if she had truly made the right choice. The answer came 2 hours later when Sarah appeared at her door. "Dr. Johnson wants to see you in his office. Now." Emily's heart sank. She followed Sarah through the hallways, each step feeling like an eternity. When she entered Gabriel's office, she found not only him, but also Laura Mendez, the HR director, a 60-year-old woman, known for her unwavering ethical stance. "Mrs. Johnson, please have a seat." Laura indicated a chair. Her voice was professional, but not hostile. Emily sat down, her hands clenched in her lap, trying to control her breathing. "You must be wondering why I called you here," Laura began, adjusting her glasses. "There has been a report to the board regarding a possible inappropriate relationship between you and Dr. Johnson, with allegations of professional favoritism." "Laura?" Gabriel started, but the HR director raised her hand, silencing him. "Dr. Johnson, please, let me handle this appropriately," she said firmly, and then turned, her attention back to Emily. "Mrs. Johnson, I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there any kind of personal relationship between you and Dr. Johnson?" Emily looked at Gabriel, who nodded almost imperceptibly, encouraging her to be honest. "Yes," she said clearly, even with her heart pounding in her chest. "There is." "And when did this relationship begin?" "Very recently, after my promotion. Not before," Emily replied, maintaining steady eye contact. "And do you feel that your promotion was based on merit or influenced by your personal relationship?" Laura asked, making notes on a tablet. "Based on merit," Emily answered without hesitation. "I presented quality work, detailed reports, analyses that significantly contributed to the company. I am willing to have any of my work reviewed by third parties to prove this." Laura nodded, typing a few more notes. "Dr. Johnson has already provided me with all the documentation of your work, and I must agree, it is exceptional. The issue is not your competence, Mrs. Johnson. The issue is the appearance of a conflict of interest." "I understand that," Emily said, "and I am willing to accept any necessary changes to eliminate that conflict. If I need to report to another director, if I need to change departments, I am willing." "No," Gabriel intervened, and there was a firmness in his voice that did not allow for argument. "Emily is the best person for the position she holds. Transferring her would not only harm her, but the entire company. There is another solution." Laura raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening, Dr. Johnson." "I will step back from direct contact with her supervision. She will report to James Carter, our CFO. I will recuse myself from her performance evaluation, which will be conducted solely by James and validated by the board. And Emily and I will sign a conduct agreement that makes it clear that any professional decision involving her will be made by third parties, not by me. This eliminates the conflict." Laura was silent for a moment, considering. "It's a viable solution, but you both understand that even with these measures, there will still be discussions, speculations." "Let people talk," Emily said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "As long as my work speaks for itself, I don't care about gossip." "Well said," Laura smiled for the first time. "Very well, I will prepare the necessary documentation and present this solution to the board. But I need you both to understand, any sign of favoritism, any suspicion of decisions based on personal relationships instead of merit, and we will revisit this conversation with much more serious consequences. Are we clear?" "Perfectly," Gabriel and Emily said in unison. When Laura left, Emily finally allowed herself to breathe deeply. "That was intense. And it's not over yet," Gabriel said, but there was relief in his voice. "The board will want to interrogate us too, but the worst is over, Emily. Laura is on our side, and if she is, it means we have a chance." "Gabriel," Emily stood up and walked to face him, "I need you to understand one thing. I will not be the reason your reputation is tarnished. I will not be the reason the company you built suffers. If at any point this becomes too big, if it starts to harm you or the company, I will leave. Not because I don't care about you, but precisely because I do." He took her face in his hands, forcing her to look directly into his eyes. "No, I won't accept that. We're not going to give up at the first difficulty. We promised to face this together, remember? But no buts," he interrupted her. "Emily, you made me start living again. For the first time in 5 years, I wake up in the morning and have something to look forward to beyond numbers and meetings. You and Sophie brought color back to a world that had become completely gray. So no, I won't let you give up on us because you're afraid of hurting me. We will get through this together." And when he kissed her there in his office, with the door closed but knowing anyone could walk in, Emily finally allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could really make it. James Carter had not finished, and the war he was starting would be much dirtier than they imagined. The next 2 months were an emotional roller coaster that tested every fiber of Emily Johnson's resilience. The changes implemented by HR took effect immediately. She began reporting to David Thompson, the CFO, a 55-year-old man, professional to the core, who made it clear from day one that he would evaluate her work with rigorous and impartial criteria. "Mrs. Johnson, I don't care who you associate with outside of work hours," David had said in their first one-on-one meeting. "But here in this office, you are my strategic analysis coordinator, and I expect excellence, nothing more, nothing less." And Emily delivered excellence. She worked even harder than before, arriving earlier, leaving later, reviewing every report 3 times before submitting, anticipating every question, proving day after day that her position was well-deserved. The weariness was visible, permanent dark circles under her eyes, a weight loss that made her clothes loose, a constant tension in her shoulders. Gabriel noticed, and he hated not being able to help more directly. They had established strict rules. No office meetings beyond strictly professional ones, no public displays of affection, no one-on-one meetings without the presence of a third party. It was torturous to be so close and have to maintain distance, but outside the office it was different. Gabriel began showing up at Mrs. Smith's apartment on Friday nights, always bringing something: pizza for dinner, a new book for Sophie, flowers for Emily and her mother. Sophie had become attached to him in a way that simultaneously warmed and scared Emily's heart. The girl eagerly awaited him, saved drawings to show, shared school stories with an enthusiasm she had never shown, even with her own father. "Uncle Gabriel, can you help me with my math homework?" Sophie would ask, and Gabriel would patiently sit at the kitchen table, explaining fractions with a patience Emily didn't know he had. Mrs. Smith watched everything with attentive maternal eyes. One night, after Sophie went to bed and Gabriel left, she pulled Emily aside for a conversation. "Honey, I need to talk to you," Mrs. Smith began, serving reheated coffee in 2 mugs. They were sitting at the kitchen table, the only sound being the hum of the old refrigerator in the corner. "Mom, if this is about Gabriel, it is about him, and about you, and about Sophie," Mrs. Smith interrupted, her face showing genuine concern. "Emily, I see how you look at each other. I see how he is with Sophie, and I see how you are wearing yourself out trying to prove something to people who have already decided to judge you anyway. Mom, I need to do this. I need to show that your work speaks for itself, honey. You have always been brilliant, always dedicated. The problem isn't you. The problem is that people can't accept that a woman, especially a single mother, can succeed without some kind of male help." Mrs. Smith made air quotes with her fingers. "It's pure and simple sexism." Emily felt tears prick her eyes. She was so tired of fighting, so tired of constantly proving her worth. "I don't know what else to do, Mum. I work harder than anyone, deliver better results, yet people still whisper when I walk by. I still get looks. James is back from his suspension and is spreading poison throughout the department." "Then maybe it's time to stop caring about what those people think." Mrs. Smith took her daughter's hand across the table. "Emily, you deserve to be happy. You deserve to have someone look at you the way Gabriel looks at you. You deserve a life beyond work and motherhood. And Sophie deserves to have a positive father figure, even if he isn't her biological father. But what if it goes wrong? What if I lose my job? What if Sophie gets hurt when he leaves? Emily voiced her deepest fears. And what if it goes? Right, Mrs. Smith countered. What if you finally found someone who values you? What if Sophie gains a real family? Honey, you can't live in fear of what if. At some point, you need to take a leap of faith. That night, lying next to Sophie, Emily allowed herself to imagine a future with Gabriel, a place of their own where Sophie could have her own room. Weekends together. Maybe, eventually, something more permanent. The image was so tempting that it scared her. Meanwhile, at the office, the situation was deteriorating. James had returned from his suspension more cautious, but no less venomous. He no longer made direct comments, but his insinuations were constant and corrosive. I heard the coordinator got another report approved without questions. How lucky to have connections, right? He would comment casually during lunches in the cafeteria. It's impressive how some people get promotions so quickly. She must be really talented, he said with a fake smile as Emily walked through the halls. Rachel, Emily's best friend, began conducting her own investigation. As a labor attorney, she had contacts in various companies and knew how to obtain information. One night, she showed up at Mrs. Smith's apartment with a serious expression. Emily, I need to tell you something, and you won't like it, Rachel said after Sophie was put to bed. What did you find out? Emily asked, her stomach already churning with apprehension. James is doing more than spreading rumors. He's gathering documentation, emails, meeting records, clock-in and clock-out times, anything that could suggest favoritism. He's building a case. A case for what? Emily felt her blood run cold. To take to the board again, but this time he wants to have concrete evidence that Gabriel is favoring you professionally, Rachel explained, pulling out some papers from her bag. I got this information from a contact in the legal department. Emily, he is trying to take you down, and he is willing to destroy Gabriel in the process. But why? What does he gain from this? Emily asked, although part of her already knew the answer. He wants your position, and he wants Gabriel out of the way. Apparently, James has ambitions to eventually take a directorial position, and Gabriel has always blocked him due to competence issues. This is personal revenge. Emily picked up the papers and read with growing horror. James had documented every interaction between her and Gabriel, highlighted every project she led, and even informally interviewed other employees about perceptions of favoritism. This is sick, she murmured. It's strategic, Rachel corrected, and dangerous. Emily, you need to tell Gabriel now. Emily grabbed her phone with trembling hands and sent a message to Gabriel. I need to see you, it's urgent. Can you come here? The response came in seconds. I'm on my way now. Gabriel arrived 20 minutes later, still in a suit despite it being past 9 in the evening. Mrs. Smith, sensing the gravity of the situation, discreetly excused herself to the bedroom. Rachel stayed, knowing her expertise might be needed. When Emily showed the documents to Gabriel, she saw something she had never seen on his face before. Genuine fear. Not for himself, but for her. That son of a bitch, Gabriel murmured, flipping through the pages. He is building a case of workplace harassment and abuse of power. If he presents this to the board like this, it will look like I manipulated you from the start. But that's not how it was, Emily protested. I know, you know, but look at how he organized everything. Every meeting we had looked suspicious. Every project you led looks like favoritism. He is painting a picture where you are the victim and I am the predator. So what do we do? Emily asked, feeling panic begin to rise. It was Rachel who answered, You both get ahead of this. Take it to the board before he does, but you need something he doesn't have. You need evidence that her work is objectively exceptional, regardless of the relationship, and you need to be prepared to take drastic measures. What kind of measures? Gabriel asked, but from the look on his face, Emily suspected he already knew the answer. Gabriel may need to resign as CEO, or Emily may need to leave the company, or both, Rachel said brutally honestly, because in the end, even if they prove there was nothing unethical, the perception is already stained, and sometimes perception matters more than reality. The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Emily looked at Gabriel and saw the anguish in his eyes. The realization that their relationship was costing more than either of them had imagined. "No," Gabriel finally said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "We are not going to let him win. We are not going to let a petty opportunist destroy what we have built. Emily has worked too hard, is too competent to have her reputation destroyed by gossip and insinuations." "Gabriel, maybe Rachel is right. Maybe I should—" Emily began, but he interrupted her, taking her hands with an urgency that was almost desperate. "No, not you. If anyone is going to leave, it's me. The company can survive without me at the helm, but you deserve your career. You deserve your success." "Are you talking about resigning?" Emily asked, shocked. "Gabriel, this company is your life. You built all of this from scratch." "And it means nothing if it means losing you," he said, and there was a raw truth in those words that made Emily feel tears streaming down her face. "You both are being too dramatic," Rachel intervened, though her voice was softer. "We haven't reached that point yet. First, you take this to the board. Show that you are aware of the situation, that you have taken all ethical measures, and that Emily's work speaks for itself. If the board still wants to take drastic measures, then you consider your options, but don't give up before fighting." Gabriel nodded slowly, but Emily could see that he was already making plans, already calculating scenarios. "I will call an extraordinary board meeting for tomorrow. I will present everything, the relationship, the measures we have taken, and this smear campaign by James, and I will make it clear that if they think my presence as CEO is compromising the company, I am willing to step back," he said, and there was a fierce determination in his voice. "Gabriel, no," Emily began, but he placed a finger over her lips, gently silencing her. "Listen. I spent 5 years building this company at a frenetic pace because it was the only thing that kept me going after I lost Emily. Work was my escape mechanism, my way of not having to deal with the pain. But you made me want to live again. You made me remember that there is more to life than profits and stocks. If I have to choose between the company and you, I choose you. Always." Rachel discreetly stood up and left the room, leaving them alone. Emily threw herself into Gabriel's arms, burying her face in his chest as she finally allowed the tears to flow freely. "I don't want you to give up everything for me," she sobbed. "I don't want to be the reason you lose what you built." "You are not the reason. James is. The sexism is. A system that doesn't allow a competent woman to succeed without questioning her motivations is the reason," Gabriel said, stroking her hair. "And you know what else? If I leave the CEO position, I will create something new, something meaningful. And I will do it with you by my side, if you want. Always," she whispered against his chest. "But Gabriel, Sophie, she has become so attached to you. If all of this blows up, if you disappear from her life too—" "I will not disappear," he promised fiercely. "No matter what happens with work, I will not vanish from your life. Sophie, or yours. Do you understand? We're in this together, whatever the outcome." They stayed like that for long minutes, just holding each other, trying to absorb strength from the closeness. When they finally separated, Emily's eyes were red, but there was a new determination in them. "Then, let's fight. Together. But we do it the right way. No secrets, no half-truths, total transparency with the board." I agree, Gabriel said, and then to her surprise smiled. You know I love you, right? It was the first time he had said those words. Emily felt her heart stop for a second and then race uncontrollably. You... what? I love you. I took a long time to admit it, even to myself, because I was so afraid to feel this again after Emily. But it's true. I love you, Emily Johnson. I love your strength, your intelligence, your dedication. To Sophie, the way you face the world with your head held high, even when everything seems to be falling apart. I love you with an intensity that sometimes scares me. Emily touched his face with trembling hands, her eyes searching his in the dim light of the room. I love you too, and that terrifies me, because I have so much more to lose than just a job. I have Sophie, I have you, I have this family we are building, and the thought of losing all of that paralyzes me. Then we won't lose, he said simply, as if it were that easy. And maybe, Emily thought, maybe with him by her side it could be. They kissed there in Mrs. Smith's modest living room, with the noise of New York City traffic filtering through the windows, and for the first time in weeks, Emily felt genuine hope. But what neither of them knew was that James had already made his move, and that the next morning, when they arrived at the office, they would find a situation far worse than they imagined. Because James had not only gathered evidence of alleged favoritism, he had discovered something about Gabriel's past that could destroy not only his professional reputation, but also his relationship with Emily, and he was about to use that information in the most devastating way possible. The next morning dawned with a light, persistent rain that turned New York City into a grey blur. Emily arrived at the office at 7 in the morning, earlier than usual, with deep, dark circles marking her face, despite the concealer she had tried to apply. The night had been practically sleepless, her mind spinning in endless circles about the extraordinary board meeting that would take place in a few hours. As she stepped off the elevator on the 30th floor, she immediately sensed that something was wrong. The air felt charged with a palpable tension, and small groups of employees whispered in the hallways, quickly dispersing as she passed. The looks she received were not just curious. They were accusatory, some even sympathetic, as if she were a victim of something terrible. Emily? Sarah appeared out of nowhere, holding a coffee cup with visibly trembling hands. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. I need to talk to you, now, in my office. The tone left no room for questions. Emily followed her, her heart racing with each step. When the door closed behind them, Sarah placed the cup on the table and pulled out a large envelope. This arrived this morning. It was delivered to every board member, to all the directors, and it seems that copies were accidentally left in various printers on the floor, Sarah said, her voice heavy with anger and sadness. Emily, I'm sorry you have to find out this way. With trembling hands, Emily opened the envelope. Inside were several printed pages, emails, documents, and an anonymous letter detailing something that made her blood run cold. The letter alleged that Gabriel had a history of inappropriate relationships with employees. It specifically cited a case from 7 years ago, before Emily passed away, involving a junior analyst named Lisa Brown. According to the document, Lisa had been rapidly promoted after starting an affair with Gabriel and had abruptly resigned after 6 months, receiving a generous severance package and a confidentiality agreement. The attached emails, which Emily didn't know if they were real or forged, suggested intimate communications between Gabriel and Lisa, messages that could be interpreted as harassment or emotional manipulation. There were also financial documents showing a substantial transfer made to Lisa when she left the company. "This can't be true," Emily whispered, but her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. "Gabriel wouldn't do this." Sarah sat down next to her, taking her hand. I worked here at that time. Lisa Brown existed. She worked here, was promoted, and left abruptly, but—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "The story I know is very different from this." "Then tell me the truth," Emily pleaded, clinging to any hope. "Lisa was competent, yes, and was promoted based on merit, but she developed an obsession with Gabriel. She started making inappropriate advances, showing up in places where she knew he would be, sending constant messages. Gabriel always kept a professional distance. He was always correct. But Lisa interpreted any kindness as romantic interest," Sarah explained, her face showing the painful memory. The situation became untenable. Lisa started making threats, saying she would tell Emily that they had an affair, that she would sue the company, that she would destroy his reputation. Gabriel, wanting to protect Emily, who was already sick, at the time she had heart problems, offered Lisa a generous exit, a severance package in exchange for her silence and peaceful departure. "Then why is there a confidentiality agreement?" Emily asked, her voice growing weaker. "Exactly for that, to protect both parties. Lisa couldn't make false accusations, and Gabriel couldn't talk about her inappropriate behavior. It was mutual protection." Sarah sighed deeply. "But whoever leaked this, and we both know—" Emily felt nausea rising in her throat. It didn't matter what the truth was. What mattered was perception. And the perception based on these documents was devastating. "Where is Gabriel?" she asked. "In his office. The board wants to see him in an hour." "Emily, it's going to be brutal. They're going to question everything, the old case, your relationship, if there's a pattern of behavior. And even if everything is explainable, the damage to his reputation is already done." Emily stood up, determined. "I need to talk to him." "Emily, wait!" Sarah tried to stop her, but she was already leaving. The hallway to Gabriel's office felt like it was 5 kilometers long. Every person passing by whispered, every glance carried judgment. When she reached his door, she didn't knock. She simply walked in. Gabriel was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city below. He didn't turn when she entered, but his voice sounded hoarse when he spoke. "You saw." It wasn't a question. Emily closed the door behind her and leaned against it, trying to control the emotions threatening to spill over. "Sarah told me her version. Now I want to hear yours." Gabriel finally turned, and what she saw on his face broke her heart. There was pain there, yes, but also something worse: guilt. "Everything Sarah told you is true. Lisa worked here, she was competent, and she developed an obsession with me. I always kept my distance, always remained professional. But—" He ran a hand through his hair, undoing his careful hairstyle. "I wasn't transparent enough with Emily about what was happening. I thought I could handle it alone, that I didn't need to worry her when she was already dealing with health issues. And when Lisa started making threats, I panicked." "So it's true that you paid her to leave," Emily said, hating how accusatory her voice sounded. "Yes, and I don't regret it," Gabriel replied firmly. "Emily was dying, Emily. The doctors gave us 6 months, maybe a year. Every day with her was precious, and Lisa was threatening to ruin those last months with lies and scandals. So yes, I paid her to go away. I paid for peace. I paid to protect my wife from unnecessary suffering." "And the confidentiality agreement?" she pressed, needing to understand everything. "It was the lawyer's idea, to protect both sides. Lisa couldn't spread lies about a non-existent relationship, and I couldn't talk about the harassment I endured. Yes, Emily, men can also be victims of harassment. And at the time, with Emily sick and my reputation at stake, I couldn't afford to fight publicly." Emily absorbed all of this, processing each word. Part of her wanted to believe completely, wanted to embrace him and say it was all okay. But another part, the part that had been betrayed before, that had trusted David and been destroyed, whispered warnings. "Why didn't you tell me?" she finally asked, her voice heavy with hurt. When we started getting involved, when you knew people would question our relationship, why didn't you tell me about Lisa? Because Gabriel took a step toward her, but stopped when he saw her stiffen. Because it was buried. I thought it was in the past, that it would never come back. And because I was afraid that if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. You would see the parallels, a rapidly promoted employee, a relationship that started in the workplace, and think I was repeating a pattern. And you're not, Emily asked, tears finally starting to stream down her face. Gabriel, do you see how this looks? Do you see how easily they can paint you as a predator with a history of getting involved with vulnerable employees? But it's not like that, he said desperately, finally closing the distance between them and holding her shoulders. Emily, you're not Lisa. Our story isn't that story. With Lisa, I was trying to be polite and professional while she was harassing me. With you it was the opposite. I was the one who pursued you. I was the one who couldn't keep my distance. I was the one who became obsessed. If anyone was inappropriate in this dynamic, it was me. And that's supposed to make me feel better? Emily asked, gently pushing him away. Gabriel, you just admitted that you pursued me, that you became obsessed. You were my boss. How is this different? Because you had power too, he replied quickly. You always had the option to say no, to report me to HR, to leave if you wanted. Never, not once, did I use my position to pressure you. Every time we got closer, it was a mutual choice. You remember that, don't you? Emily remembered. She remembered every moment. The first kiss she initiated, the times she chose to stay when she could have left, the conscious decision she made to let him into her life and into Sophie's. But now, with those documents staining her vision, everything felt less clear. I don't know what to think anymore, she admitted, sliding down the door until she was sitting on the floor, her head in her hands. I want to believe you, Gabriel. I love you. But these accusations, even if they're false, they've already done the damage. People see you differently now. They see me differently. Gabriel knelt in front of her, taking her face in, his hands, and forcing her to look at him. Then let me fight for us. Let me go to that board meeting and tell the truth. I'll bring the full emails, unedited. I'll bring witnesses, Sarah, the lawyer who mediated the agreement, even Lisa if necessary. I'll prove this is a smear campaign orchestrated by James. And what if it's not enough? Emily asked, her voice breaking. And what if, even with evidence, they decide that you are a risk? What if I am seen as just another in a line of women that you manipulated? That won't happen. That I won't let it, he promised fiercely. And if it does happen, if the board decides I need to leave, then I will. But I won't give up on you. I won't let James destroy what we've built. Before Emily could respond, the door swung open abruptly. David Thompson, her direct superior, entered with a grave expression. Dr. Johnson, Ms. Johnson, the board has moved the meeting up. They want you both there now. And he looked at Emily with what seemed like compassion. They brought in an external investigator. This is going to be more serious than we thought. Gabriel helped Emily to her feet, and they exchanged a look laden with meaning. It was the moment of truth. It was time to face the consequences of every choice they had made. The boardroom was on the top floor, an imposing space with a solid wood table that could seat 20 people. When Emily and Gabriel entered, they found not only the 7 board members, but also Laura Smith from HR, a man they didn't recognize, presumably the investigator, and, to Emily's horror, James Carter. "What is he doing here?" Gabriel asked immediately, his voice dangerously low. "Mr. Carter was the one who brought these concerns to our attention," replied Edward Smith, the board chairman, a 70-year-old man with completely white hair and a stern expression. "He has the right to be present while we investigate your allegations." James was sitting in the corner of the room, and when his eyes met Emily's, there was a malicious triumph there that made her anger boil. "Please, take a seat." Edward indicated two isolated chairs on one side of the table, positioned as if they were defendants in a courtroom. "Let's get straight to the point. We have received documentation alleging that Dr. Johnson has a history of inappropriate relationships with subordinates, specifically Ms. Lisa Brown 7 years ago, and now with Ms. Johnson. There are also allegations that Ms. Johnson's promotion was motivated not by merit, but by personal favoritism." "Both allegations are false," Gabriel replied firmly, though Emily could see the tension in his jaw, "and I can prove it." "Then please proceed." Edward gestured, and Gabriel began to speak. He told everything, the full story of Lisa, the harassment she endured, the threats, the decision to offer a settlement to protect Emily. He presented complete emails that clearly showed his discomfort and repeated attempts to maintain professional boundaries. He explained the confidentiality agreement and why it was necessary. Then he spoke about Emily, how she was hired based on exceptional qualifications, how she was promoted after delivering high-quality work, how their relationship only began afterward, and how they immediately implemented measures to avoid conflicts of interest. "Ms. Johnson is not just competent, she is exceptional," Gabriel concluded, looking directly at each board member. "Every report she produced can be reviewed by external auditors. Every analysis, every decision, every recommendation, and I assure you they will find work of superior quality compared to analysts with 10 more years of experience." "That's very nice, Dr. Johnson," James interjected, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But it doesn't change the fact that there is a pattern here. Young employee, rapidly promoted, relationship with the CEO. How can we be sure that Ms. Johnson is not being manipulated in the same way that Ms. Brown alleged she was?" Before Gabriel could respond, Emily stood up. Her hands trembled, but her voice came out firm and clear. "May I speak?" Edward nodded, surprised. Emily took a deep breath and began, "Board members, my name is Emily Johnson. I am 32 years old, a single mother of a 7-year-old girl, and I have spent the last 3 years rebuilding my life after a marriage that ended in betrayal and humiliation. I am not a victim. I am not a naive woman who can be manipulated. I'm a highly qualified professional who has worked my butt off to be here." She could feel everyone's eyes in the room fixed on her, but she continued, fueled by a righteous anger that had been building for months. "When I was hired, I did not know Gabriel Johnson beyond his professional reputation. When I was promoted, it was because I delivered a report that identified critical gaps in our methodology, something more experienced analysts failed to do. And yes, I fell in love with my boss, but you know what else? He fell in love with me too, not because I am beautiful or because I was easy, but because we are compatible, because we understand each other, because we built something real together." She turned to James, and there was fire in her eyes. "And you, James, are doing this not out of ethical concern or to uphold some principle. You are doing it because you want my position and want Gabriel out of your way. You documented every interaction we had, distorted every moment, manipulated evidence, all because your petty ambition cannot accept that a woman can be more competent than you. This is absurd," James began, but Emily cut him off. "I have your emails too, James. Emails where you asked me to share privileged information about strategic decisions. Messages where you suggested that we could help each other if I passed along confidential reports. You are not concerned with ethics. You are trying to use this situation for your own benefit." The silence that followed was absolute. Edward looked at James with a new expression: suspicion. "Mr. Carter, is this true?" James paled, realizing too late that he had completely underestimated Emily. was just trying to better understand the company's processes. You were trying to obtain privileged information through manipulation, Laura Smith from HR interjected. Ms. Johnson, do you have those emails? I do, and I am willing to hand them over right now, Emily replied, pulling out her phone. What happened? Next was a twist that neither James nor anyone else expected. The emails clearly showed that James had repeatedly tried to obtain confidential information from Emily, suggested partnerships that bordered on bribery, and made inappropriate insinuations about her relationship with Gabriel as a form of pressure. This is extremely serious, Edward said, his voice laden with restrained anger. Mr. Carter, you are terminated for cause, effective immediately, and depending on what our legal team determines, you may face lawsuits for defamation and attempted corporate sabotage. James stood up abruptly, his face red with rage and humiliation. You all will regret this, all of you. This company is rotten from the inside out, and you are all so blinded by security. Please escort Mr. Carter out of the building, Edward interrupted coldly. As James was taken away, still shouting empty threats, Edward turned back to Gabriel and Emily. Now regarding your situation, Dr. Johnson, I believe your version of the case with Lisa Brown. The investigator we hired had already reached the same conclusion even before this meeting. And as for the relationship with Mrs. Johnson, he paused, looking at the other board members, who nodded in agreement. We believe you have taken appropriate measures to avoid a conflict of interest. The reporting structure has been modified, her evaluation is conducted by third parties, and her work is objectively exceptional. Emily felt her knees almost buckle with relief. Gabriel discreetly took her hand, squeezing it in silent support. However, Edward continued, and Emily's heart raced again, we need to consider public perception. This company has a reputation to uphold. So here is our decision. Dr. Johnson, you will continue as CEO, but with stricter oversight from the board. Any decision involving Mrs. Johnson or her department must be approved by at least 2 other directors. Mrs. Johnson, your work has been exemplary, and you will retain your position. But you both understand that you will be under constant scrutiny for the next few months. We understand, Gabriel replied, and we appreciate the trust. As they left the conference room, Emily was trembling. Gabriel guided her to his office, closed the door, and finally allowed her to collapse into his arms. It's over, she sobbed. Oh my God, I thought we had lost everything. I know, I did too. He held her tightly, kissing the top of her head. But you were incredible in there. Emily, you fought for us. You defended yourself in a way that was powerful and inspiring. I just did what needed to be done, she said, pulling away to wipe her tears. But Gabriel, it's still going to be hard. People are still going to talk. They will still judge. Let them talk, he said with a conviction she had never seen before. Let them judge, because at the end of the day we know the truth, and that's what matters. But as Emily tried to believe that, a small voice in her head whispered that perhaps the worst was yet to come, because surviving the storm didn't mean the sky was completely clear, and she was right, because 3 days later a bombshell would drop in her lap and change everything again. 3 days after the board meeting, Emily woke up at 5 in the morning with overwhelming nausea. She managed to reach the bathroom just in time before violently vomiting, clutching the edge of the toilet as her stomach rebelled. When she finally managed to stand up, her legs shaky and her face pale, she found Mrs. Smith standing in the doorway with an expression that mixed concern and something else, a maternal suspicion. "How long has it been, dear?" Mrs. Smith asked gently, offering a damp towel. "How long since what?" Emily replied, wiping her face, though part of her already knew exactly what her mother was asking. "Since your last period." Emily paused, the towel still pressed against her face, and felt the world tilt on its axis. She mentally did the calculations, once, twice, 3 times, praying to be wrong. But she wasn't. She was late, very late, 6 weeks to be exact. "Mom, I can't be pregnant. Not now, not with everything going on," she whispered, panic beginning to rise in her throat like a living creature. "Sit here, Emily." Mrs. Smith guided her back to the bedroom, making her sit on the bed. Sophie was still sound asleep on the other side, oblivious to the crisis unfolding. "Take a deep breath. First, let's make sure. Today, after you drop Sophie off at school, you'll go to the pharmacy and buy a test. There's no point in panicking before you know for sure." But Emily already knew. With a visceral certainty that came from somewhere deep, she knew she was pregnant. She recognized the signs. The morning sickness she thought was stress, the breast tenderness she attributed to the premenstrual period that never came, the excessive fatigue she justified as a consequence of the turbulent weeks. The morning passed in an automated blur. Emily dressed Sophie, made breakfast, dropped her daughter off at school, all on autopilot, while her mind spun out of control. On her way to the office, she stopped at a pharmacy far from her neighborhood, wearing sunglasses as if that made her less recognizable, and bought 3 different pregnancy tests. In the women's restroom at the office, locked in, a stall at 7:30 in the morning, Emily took all 3 tests. She didn't need to wait the recommended 3 minutes. The 2 lines appeared almost instantly on all of them, clear and unmistakable. Positive. 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 She slid down the cold bathroom wall until she was sitting on the floor, the tests still in her hands, and let the reality of the situation hit her with full force. She was pregnant with Gabriel Johnson, pregnant by her boss, pregnant in the midst of the biggest professional scandal of her life, pregnant when she had barely managed to convince the board that her relationship was legitimate and not based on manipulation. "What the hell?" she murmured to herself, and then let out a hysterical laugh that Mariana quickly transformed into solutions. What a giant mess. When she finally managed to compose herself enough to leave the bathroom, she washed her face repeatedly with cold water, applied more concealer under her swollen eyes, and took a deep breath. She had work to do. She had a meeting with David at 9 to discuss 4th quarter projections. She had responsibilities. She could deal with the pregnancy later. But throughout the day, it became increasingly clear that she couldn't simply ignore the bomb that had exploded in her life. Every time she saw Gabriel, and since the office was now under constant scrutiny, they barely exchanged words beyond the strictly professional, she felt the secret burning in her throat like acid. She needed to tell him, but how, and when, and, more importantly, what would he say? That evening, after picking up Sophie from school and having dinner with her and Mrs. Smith, Mariana put her daughter to bed and finally picked up her phone. Her fingers trembled as she typed the message to Gabriel. "You need to come here tonight. It's urgent." The response came in less than a minute. "I'm leaving now. Is everything okay?" "No, but I need to see you in person." He arrived 40 minutes later, still in a suit, but with his tie loosened and a deep look of concern etched on his face. Mrs. Smith, sensing the gravity of the situation, discreetly retreated to the bedroom, leaving them alone in the small living room. "Mariana, what happened? You look pale," Gabriel said immediately, taking her hands and noticing how cold they were. "Is it work? Did the board change their mind? Did someone threaten you?" "No, it's none of that," she said, pulling her hands back and hugging herself. "Gabriel, I don't know how to say this, so I'll be direct. I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was deafening. Mariana watched Gabriel's face, seeing the information being processed. The initial surprise, understanding slowly dawning, and then something she couldn't quite decipher. Shock? Fear? Joy? "Are you sure?" he finally asked, his voice coming out hoarse. I took 3 tests, all positive. I'm 6 weeks late, she replied, forcing herself to keep her eyes locked on his even though she wanted to look away. Gabriel took a step back, running his hands through his hair in a gesture she already recognized as a sign that he was trying to process something overwhelming. He walked to the window, looking out at the street below where cars passed, indifferent to the drama unfolding on the 3rd floor. Gabriel, say something, Mariana pleaded as the silence stretched on for too long. Anything. Are you angry? Scared? I need to know what you're thinking. He turned, and when his eyes met hers, they were shining with unshed tears. I'm terrified, he admitted, and his raw honesty was like a punch to her stomach, not because I don't want this, but because... Mariana, when Emily died, she was pregnant. 12 weeks. We hadn't told anyone yet, and then the accident. I lost both of them at once, my wife and my unborn child. Mariana felt tears streaming down her face. He had never mentioned this before, never talked about losing more than just Emily. Oh my God, Gabriel, I didn't know. I never told anyone besides Sarah and my parents, he interrupted, coming closer to her but still keeping a physical distance. It was too much to process. Losing Emily was already destroying me, but knowing I also lost the chance to be a father, to have something of her continuing, it was almost what broke me completely. And now? What do you feel now? She asked, desperately needing to understand. I feel scared that something will go wrong. Scared that I will lose you like I lost Emily. Scared that I won't be a good father because I spent so long running from this possibility. He paused, and then a small, trembling smile curved his lips. But I also feel hope. For the first time in 5 years, I feel hope that maybe, just maybe, I can have a second chance. A second chance to build a family, to be the father I always wanted to be. Mariana sobbed, and finally, Gabriel closed the distance between them, pulling her into his arms. Mariana, I want this baby, I want you, I want Sophie, I want all of us together, a real family, he said against her hair, his voice vibrating with emotion. But I understand if you don't want to. I understand if... The timing is terrible, if the professional situation makes everything impossible, if... I want to, she interrupted, pulling back to look into his eyes. I'm terrified too. The timing couldn't be worse. We can barely convince the board that our relationship is legitimate, and now I'm going to show up pregnant. They're going to say it's more proof of manipulation, that you got me pregnant to trap me, that... Then what they say can go to hell, Gabriel said fiercely. Mariana, we've been through the worst. We've faced accusations, scandal, almost lost everything, and we survived. We'll survive this, too. But how? She asked, and there was so much fear in her voice. How do we make this work? How do I keep working when I start to show? How do we explain to Sophie? How... One step at a time, he said, cupping her face in his hands. First, you go to the doctor. We'll make sure everything is okay, that you and the baby are healthy. Second, we tell Sophie, together when you're ready. Third, we deal with work when necessary, but not today. Today, just let this be ours for now. Our secret, our joy, before we have to share it with the world and deal with the complications. Mariana nodded, allowing herself to sink into his embrace, absorbing his strength and warmth. For a few precious minutes, she let herself just feel. Fear, yes, but also a flicker of joy trying to bloom amidst the panic. I love you, she whispered, and I'm going to love this baby, even if it's complicated, even if it's scary. I love you too, and I already love this baby, he replied, placing a hand on her still flat abdomen. We're going to make this work, Emily, together. But the reality of the situation quickly set in. In the following days, Emily scheduled an appointment with her gynecologist, confirmed the pregnancy, 8 weeks now, according to the ultrasound, and face the question of how to tell Sophie. They chose a Sunday afternoon in Central Park. Sophie loved going there, especially to see the ducklings in the pond. Gabriel met them near the playground, bringing popcorn and ice cream, a clear attempt to bribe the little girl to receive the news well. "Sophie, Princess, Uncle Gabriel and I want to talk to you about something important," Emily began as they sat on a bench overlooking the pond. "Is it about school? Because I swear I didn't push Johnny last week. He tripped on his own." Sophie quickly started, but Emily laughed and interrupted her. "No, sweetheart, it's not about school. It's about our family." Sophie frowned, confused, looking between her mother and Gabriel. "Is Uncle Gabriel going to live with us?" she asked, and there was so much hope in her voice that it broke Emily's heart. "Not yet, Princess, but you know how some of your friends from school have little brothers?" Gabriel gently interjected. "Yes, Maria has a baby at home. She says he cries a lot at night," Sophie replied, still seeming confused about where the conversation was going. "Well, you're going to have a little brother too, or a little sister." "We don't know yet," Emily said, watching her daughter's reaction closely. Sophie was silent for a long moment, processing. Then her eyes widened. "You have a baby in your belly, Mom." "Yes, I do." "And Uncle Gabriel is the dad?" "Yes, I am," Gabriel confirmed. Sophie looked down at her own hands, and Emily felt her heart tighten. What if Sophie felt resentful? What if she felt like she was being replaced? What if... "So does that mean Uncle Gabriel is kind of my dad too? Not my real dad because I already have one, even if he never shows up, but like a dad who really wants to be with me?" Sophie asked, and her voice was so small, so vulnerable, that Emily felt tears prick her eyes. Gabriel knelt in front of Sophie, getting to her level, and took her little hands. "Sophie, I can't replace your biological father, but I can tell you that you have become very important to me, and if you let me, I would love to be a father figure in your life, to go to your school performances, help with homework, teach you how to ride a bike, and do all the things dads do. Would you like that?" Sophie didn't respond with words. Instead, she threw herself into Gabriel's arms, hugging him with surprising strength for such a small child. And when she finally spoke, her voice was muffled against his shoulder. "I would really like that, Uncle Gabriel. Very, very much." Emily covered her mouth with her hand to stifle. A sob, watching the man she loved embrace her daughter as if she were the most precious thing in the world. In that moment, amidst all the chaos and complication, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would turn out all right. But the illusion didn't last long, because the following Monday, when Emily arrived at work, she found Rachel waiting for her in the parking lot, with an expression that boded nothing good. "Emily, we need to talk. Now," Rachel said bluntly. "Rachel, what happened?" "The news leaked. I don't know how, but it leaked. Someone saw you leaving the gynecologist's office, or maybe saw the tests, I don't know. But there are rumors in the market that you're pregnant, and that the father is Gabriel." Emily felt the world spin. How is that possible? Only Gabriel, my mom, and my doctor knew. "I don't know, but in New York City, the corporate market is small. People talk. And Emily..." Rachel hesitated, clearly reluctant to continue. "There are those saying this is the final proof that you manipulated Gabriel, that you got pregnant on purpose to secure your place in the company and in his life." "That's insane," Emily practically shouted, not caring who might hear in the parking lot. "How could I? It wasn't planned. It was an accident. It happened, and we're dealing with it the best way we can." "I know, dear, but you need to be prepared for what's coming. The board will want explanations. The corporate press will have a field day with this. And you..." Rachel took her friend's hands. "You need to decide what matters most, work or your family." I shouldn't have to choose, Emily said, but her voice came out weak, defeated. I know it shouldn't be that way, but in the real world, sometimes we have to make impossible choices. Emily went up to the office feeling like she was walking to her own judgment, and in a sense, she was. Because when the elevator doors opened on the 30th floor, she found Laura Smith from HR waiting for her. Mrs. Johnson, I need to see you in my office, and Dr. Johnson too, immediately. In Laura's office, they found not only the HR director, but also Edward Smith from the board. The atmosphere was icy. I'll be direct, Laura began. There are rumors circulating that Mrs. Johnson is pregnant. Is it true? Emily looked at Gabriel, who nodded encouragingly. She took a deep breath. Yes, I'm 8 weeks pregnant, and Gabriel is the father. Edward briefly closed his eyes, as if praying for patience. Do you understand that this complicates everything? That we will have to reevaluate the entire structure we put in place? That the press will feast on this like a giant scandal? We understand, Gabriel replied, but we also understand that our personal lives do not. Emily Johnson sighed. It should be a company matter, as long as it doesn't interfere with our work. I am still a dedicated professional. My pregnancy doesn't change that. But it changes the perception, Edward argued. It changes how people see this situation, and perception in the corporate world is everything. So what are you proposing? Emily asked, although part of her already knew the answer. Laura and Edward exchanged glances, and then Laura spoke up. We are proposing that Mrs. Johnson take a leave of absence, officially for health reasons related to the pregnancy. This gives time for the situation to cool down, for us to prepare the appropriate narrative, and for you to decide how you want to proceed with your personal life without the constant pressure of the office. A leave of absence, Emily repeated, struggling to keep bitterness out of her voice. You want to push me out. We want to protect you, and protect the company, Edward corrected. Mrs. Johnson, you have worked hard and deserve your position, but we cannot ignore the reality that your pregnancy, at this moment, will reignite the scandal we barely managed to extinguish. Give it time for things to settle down, and when you return, you will come back to your position, with full salary, maintained during the leave. Emily looked at Gabriel, seeking guidance. He was clearly struggling with himself, part of him wanting to fight, part of him wanting to protect her from the stress. If Emily goes, I go too, Gabriel finally said. I'm not going to let her carry this alone. Dr. Johnson, be reasonable, Edward began. No, enough. I spent months being reasonable, following protocols, keeping professional distance, even when every fiber of my being wanted to be close to her. And for what? So that when she gets pregnant with my child, you send her away as if it's a shame. Gabriel, Emily touched his arm gently. It's okay. It's not, he insisted, turning to her. It's not okay. You deserve better than this. I know. But I also know that fighting now will only prolong the suffering. Laura is right. I need time. I need to process all of this, take care of my health and the baby's health. And you need to stay. The company needs you, Gabriel. You can't leave because of this. Emily, please, let me do this my way, she pleaded, and he finally reluctantly nodded. Then it's decided, Laura said, clearly relieved. Mrs. Johnson, effective. Today you are on medical leave. You can work remotely on some projects if you want, but without obligations, and when the baby is born, we will discuss your return. Emily spent the rest of the day emptying her office, packing her belongings into boxes, saying goodbye to colleagues who looked at her with a mix of pity and judgment. Sarah appeared at some point, tears in her eyes, hugging her tightly. This is so unfair, dear. You don't deserve this. Life is rarely fair, Emily replied, trying to smile despite the tightness in her chest. But I'll be okay. I have Gabriel, I have Sophie. I'm going to have this baby. It's more than many people have. When she finally left the building, carrying a box of her belongings, She found Gabriel waiting for her in the parking lot. Without saying a word, he took the box from her hands, placed it in the trunk of her car, and pulled her into a long embrace. "We're going to get through this," he murmured into her hair. "I'm going to do this right, Emily. I'm going to propose to you. We're going to have this baby. We're going to be a family, and to hell with anyone who has something to say about it." And there, in the parking lot of a corporate building, with the winter sun setting over New York City, Emily finally allowed herself to cry, not just from sadness, but from relief. Because yes, she had temporarily lost her job. Yes, her reputation was tarnished. But she had something that many people never managed to have. Someone who loved her unconditionally, who was willing to fight for her, who saw in her more than just a professional achievement or a complication. She had a family. And maybe, in the end, that was all that really mattered. The next 3 months were a whirlwind of emotions, changes, and revelations that completely transformed Emily's life. The forced leave from work, which initially felt like a humiliating defeat, slowly revealed itself to be a disguised blessing. Precious time to process everything that had happened, to take care of herself and the baby growing inside her, and to finally allow herself to build something real with Gabriel, without the constant pressure of judgmental office eyes. The first weeks were the hardest. Emily woke up every day at 7 in the morning out of sheer habit, already ready to get dressed for work, before remembering that she had nowhere to go anymore. The feeling of uselessness was overwhelming. She, who had always defined her worth by her work, by her ability to produce and deliver exceptional results, suddenly found herself confined to Mrs. Smith's small apartment, with nothing but time and circular thoughts. "Honey, you need to stop dwelling," Mrs. Smith said one August morning, finding Emily sitting at the kitchen table, still in her pajamas at 11 o'clock, staring blankly at a cup of ginger tea that was cooling. "This isn't good, for you or the baby." "I know, Mum. But it's hard. I spent 3 years building my career, proving my worth, and in a matter of months everything crumbled. And the worst part is that it wasn't because I did something wrong. It was because I fell in love with the wrong person," Emily replied, bitterness evident in her voice. "Gabriel isn't the wrong person. The circumstances were complicated," Mrs. Smith corrected, sitting down beside her daughter. "And you know what? Maybe this is the universe telling you to rethink what really matters. You've always been so focused on proving something for your ex-husband, for the world, for yourself, that you forgot to live." Before Emily could respond, the doorbell rang. It was Gabriel, as it had been every morning since she left the company. He showed up before heading to the office. In the office, he always brought something: fresh fruits, prenatal vitamins, books about pregnancy, or simply his comforting presence. "Good morning, beautiful ladies," he greeted, kissing Mrs. Smith on the cheek and Emily on the lips. "Has Sophie left for school yet?" "She left an hour ago. She was super excited because today is gym class," Emily replied, allowing herself to smile for the first time that morning. Gabriel sat down next to her, taking her hand and intertwining their fingers. "So, I talked to my lawyer yesterday, and I have a proposal for you." "What kind of proposal?" Emily asked, immediately on alert. "A marriage proposal, again, but this time with a ring," he said, and to her total shock, pulled a small blue velvet box from his pocket. "Gabriel, we've already discussed this. I'm not going to marry you just because I'm pregnant," she began, but he placed a finger over her lips, silencing her. "Let me finish, please," he pleaded, and there was a vulnerability in his eyes that made her agree. "I'm not asking you to marry me because you're pregnant. I'm asking you because I wake up every day and the first thing I think about is you. Because Sophie has become as important to me as any biological daughter could be. Because when I imagine my future, you're in every scene, not as a complication or an obligation, but as the centerpiece of everything." He opened the box, revealing a simple yet beautifully crafted diamond ring set on a white gold band. This ring belonged to my grandmother. She and my grandfather were married for 62 years. When she passed away, she left it to me with a note saying, "For when you find a love worth eternity," Gabriel continued, his voice choked with emotion. "I gave a different ring to Emily because at the time I thought this one should be saved for, I don't know, something special. And now I understand that my grandmother somehow knew I would have a second chance to find a love that's worth eternity." Emily felt tears streaming freely down her face. Mrs. Smith, who had been discreetly witnessing everything from across the kitchen, was also crying. "Emily Johnson, will you marry me? Not because it's expected, not because you're pregnant, but because we love each other and want to build a life together?" Gabriel asked, his hands trembling slightly as he held the box. "Yes," she whispered, and then louder, "Yes, yes, I want to marry you." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her, and kissed her with a tenderness that made her momentarily forget all the complications, all the problems, all the scandal. In that moment it was just the two of them and the promise of a future together. "But there's more," Gabriel said when they pulled apart, keeping her face between his hands. "I've made a decision. I'm going to resign as CEO." "What? No," Emily protested immediately. "Gabriel, you can't do that. That company is your life." "Not anymore," he interrupted firmly. "Not since you came into it. Emily, I've spent the last few weeks thinking a lot about what I really want, and I realized that I built that company as a shield, as a way not to deal with the pain of losing Emily. But now I have you. I have Sophie. I'm going to have our baby. And I want to be present, really present, not just on weekends or in the spare hours between meetings." "But what are you going to do?" she asked, still processing the information. "I'm going to start a consulting firm, something smaller, more manageable, that allows me to have control over my time. I want to focus on helping companies develop more humane human resources policies, especially regarding workplace relationships and harassment protection. I want to turn what we went through into something constructive," he explained, and there was an excitement in his voice that she hadn't heard in months. "You've thought this through, haven't you?" Emily smiled through her tears. "I've been planning for 3 months, and also—" He hesitated, biting his lip in a way that made her nervous. "I also want you to be my partner. When you're ready, of course. After the baby is born, after you recover. But Emily, you're brilliant. Your perspective, your experience, your analytical ability, all of that would be invaluable. We could build something together, something that's ours." Emily fell silent, processing. The idea of working with Gabriel, of building something from scratch together, was simultaneously terrifying and incredibly tempting. "Can I think about it?" "Of course, no pressure, but promise me you'll seriously consider it." "I promise." That night, after Gabriel left and Sophie was asleep, Emily had a long conversation with Mrs. Smith and Rachel, who had come over for dinner. "He proposed to you," Rachel said for the 10th time, admiring the ring on Emily's finger, "and he's going to leave the company for you. Mari, do you have any idea how fairy tale this is?" "It's not a fairy tale, it's scary," Emily replied, but she was smiling. "Rachel, what if I accept the partnership proposal and everything goes wrong? What if working together destroys our relationship?" "What if it goes right?" Rachel shot back, echoing what Mrs. Smith had said weeks earlier. "Emily, you have to stop always expecting the worst. Sometimes good things just happen." The following weeks brought more changes. Gabriel officially announced his resignation from the board, causing shockwaves in the financial market. The news made the cover of business magazines with fervent speculation about his motivations. Some said he was fleeing from scandal, others that he had lost interest after Emily's death. Few knew the truth, that he was simply choosing love and family over power and prestige. The media reaction to Emily's pregnancy and engagement was, predictably, brutal. There were sensationalist articles painting her as a gold digger who had intentionally gotten pregnant to secure the millionaire CEO. Others portrayed her as a victim of manipulation, a vulnerable employee seduced by a predatory boss. Few cared to discover the real truth, that they were simply two people who fell in love under complicated circumstances. "Did you see this?" Rachel burst into the apartment one September afternoon, waving her tablet furiously. "There's a corporate gossip columnist saying you're the new Lisa Brown, that David has a type and a pattern of behavior." Emily, who was 20 weeks pregnant and finally starting to show a small bump, took the tablet and read the article. Every word was a stab, twisting her story into something sordid and calculated. "I'm not reading any more of this," she finally said, handing back the tablet. "I can't control what people write or think. I can only control how I react, and I'm not going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me destroyed." "Since when did you get so zen?" Rachel asked, impressed. "Since I realized that the opinions of strangers don't put food on the table, don't take care of my baby, and definitely won't determine my happiness," Emily replied. And for the first time in months, she felt like she truly believed it. But the real test came when, unexpectedly, she received a call from Lisa Brown. "Hello?" Emily answered cautiously, not recognizing the number. "Emily Johnson. My name is Lisa Brown, I think. You know who I am." Emily's heart stopped for a second. She was the last person she expected to hear from. "Lisa. Yes, I know who you are. Look, I saw the news. I saw what they're saying about you, about David, and—" Lisa paused, and Emily could hear the hesitation in her voice. "And it's not fair. What happened between me and David is not what they're saying now. And I think you deserve to know the truth from someone who was there." They arranged to meet at a discreet cafe in the Upper East Side 2 days later. Lisa was a beautiful 38-year-old woman with short black hair and intelligent eyes. When they sat down, there was a palpable tension in the air. "Why did you want to meet me?" Emily asked directly. "Because they're using my story to destroy you and David. And it's not fair," Lisa replied, nervously fiddling with the coffee cup in front of her. "Emily, I was an idiot 7 years ago. David was always completely professional with me. He always maintained boundaries. But I was obsessed with him. I interpreted every kindness as interest, every polite smile as flirting. And when he made it clear he wasn't interested, that he was married and happy, I lost my mind." "You threatened him," Emily said, "not as an accusation, but as a fact." "Yes. I threatened to tell Helena that we had an affair. I threatened to sue for harassment that never happened. I did things I'm deeply ashamed of," Lisa admitted, tears starting to stream down her face. "David offered me a generous exit when he could have destroyed me. He could have made my instability and inappropriate behavior public, but he didn't. He protected my reputation, even when I was trying to destroy his. Why are you telling me this now? Because I've been in therapy a lot, and I realized I had serious boundary and self-esteem issues. I've worked on them, I've grown, I've changed. And when I saw how they were distorting that story to make you look calculating or him look predatory, I couldn't stay quiet." Lisa wiped her tears. "You both deserve to be happy, and you deserve for the truth to be known. Would you be willing to make a public statement, to refute the stories?" Emily asked, barely daring to believe. "Yes, and I've already contacted my lawyer. I'm going to send an open letter to the major corporate media outlets explaining exactly what happened. It won't erase everything, but at least it will offer a counterpoint to the narrative that's been spread." When Emily told David about the meeting that night, he was visibly moved. Lisa is doing this? After everything? People change, David. People grow. And maybe she's finally in a place where she can take responsibility for what she did, Emily replied, settling into the new sofa of the apartment that David had rented for them, a 3-bedroom space in Brooklyn, away from the eyes of the Upper East Side, where they could truly start fresh as a family. "You're amazing, you know that," David said, sitting beside her and placing his hand on her now visibly rounded belly. "Another man in your place would be consumed by jealousy or insecurity, but you saw an opportunity for truth and justice." "Or maybe I'm just too tired to keep fighting," she joked, but leaned her head on his shoulder. "David, I'm scared. About the delivery, about being a mother again, about whether I'll manage to balance everything, and mostly about whether we'll survive as a couple when the reality of day-to-day life hits. I'm scared too," he admitted, "but one thing I've learned in this life, it's worth being scared when you're fighting for something that really matters. And you, Sophie, this baby, you both matter more than anything." Lisa's letter was published the following week and caused exactly the stir they had hoped for. Some accused her of being paid by David to clean up his image. Others finally began to question the narrative that had been fed for months, and some, finally, began to see the truth. That relationships are complex, that people are not simply victims or villains, and that genuine love can flourish even in the most complicated circumstances. The board of the Johnson Investment Group, seeing the tide of public opinion beginning to shift, did something surprising. Edward Smith personally called Emily. "Mrs. Johnson, or should I say future Mrs. Smith, I would like to discuss your return to the company." "I'm not sure that's a good idea," Emily replied honestly. "I understand your hesitation, but after Ms. Brown's letter, after reviewing all your work with external auditors, it became clear to the board that we made a mistake. You are exceptionally talented, and letting you go was a loss. To the company, we would like to offer your position back with a salary increase and the guarantee that any discrimination related to your pregnancy or relationship will be treated with zero tolerance." Emily was silent for a long moment. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Smith. Truly. But I must decline. I'm building something new, something of my own, and I think it's time to move on." When she hung up the phone, she felt lighter than she had in months, because finally, she was not defining her worth by what others thought of her or by the position she held. She was defining herself by her own choices, on her own terms. "You turned it down?" Gabriel asked when she told him later, and there was admiration in his voice. "I did. Because I realized something. I don't want to spend my life proving my worth to people who have already decided to judge me. I want to build something where my value is inherent, where my voice matters from the start. I want to be your partner, Gabriel. I want to build this consultancy with you. I want it to be our legacy, not just for our children, but for all the people who will find themselves in impossible situations like ours and need to know there's a way through the judgment." He kissed her then, deeply and completely, and when they pulled apart, there were tears on both their faces. "Then let's do this, together, as equals, as partners in every sense of the word." And for the first time since that fateful meeting 10 months ago, Emily believed completely, without reservations, that everything was going to be okay. Not because it would be easy. She knew there would be challenges, obstacles, tough days, but because they had each other. And sometimes that was all they really needed. The spring sky in New York City was painted a deep blue, dotted with blooming cherry blossom trees that transformed the streets into pink carpets. It was the first Saturday of October, and the city was breathing that renewing energy that only spring can bring, the promise of new beginnings, of cycles closing and others opening. Emily was sitting in the garden of the small party hall they had, rented in Brooklyn, one hand resting on her 7-month belly, watching Sophie run between the tables, decorated with wildflowers and white candles. The girl, radiant in her lilac flower girl dress, was helping Mrs. Smith arrange the final details for the ceremony that would take place in 2 hours. "Mom! Mom, look! The origami birds we made look beautiful in the trees," Sophie shouted, pointing to the branches where dozens of small paper birds swayed gently in the breeze. "They do look beautiful, Princess. You did an amazing job," Emily replied, smiling even with the tears that were stubbornly forming, those damn pregnancy hormones making her cry over anything. Nervous. Rachel appeared at her side, elegant in an emerald green bridesmaid dress that beautifully contrasted with her dark hair. She held 2 glasses, one of champagne for herself and one of sparkling grape juice for Emily. "Terrified," Emily admitted, accepting the glass, "not about the wedding itself, but about everything that comes after. Rachel, in 2 months I'm going to have a baby. In 3 months, we're officially launching the consultancy. Sophie is going to change schools. We're moving into a real house. It's a lot all at once. It's life happening, dear, and you're going to handle it all just like you always have, with that impressive stubbornness that defines you," Rachel smiled, toasting with her. "But can I say one thing? You look radiant, happier than I've seen you in, well, maybe in all our friendship." Emily reflected on that. It was true. Despite the chaos, despite the uncertainties, despite all the obstacles they had faced in the last 10 months, she was genuinely happy. Not the naive happiness of someone who thinks everything will be perfect, but the mature happiness of someone who has learned that imperfect can also be beautiful. "You know what's funny?" Emily said, watching Sophie now trying to teach Mrs. Smith a TikTok choreography. 10 months ago, I was obsessed with controlling every aspect of my life. I had a detailed plan of how everything should be, and then Gabriel showed up and completely destroyed each of those plans. He made me lose my job, get pregnant unexpectedly, face public scandal. Objectively speaking, he turned my life upside down. "But," Rachel encouraged, knowing there was more, "but I've never felt more alive. I've never felt so whole. It's as if all those years I spent building walls to protect myself were actually imprisoning me. And Gabriel didn't destroy my life. He freed me to truly live." "Wow, that was deep," Rachel joked, but there were tears in her eyes too. "Damn it, Emily, you're going to make me smudge my makeup before the ceremony." Sarah then appeared, carrying the wedding dress on a hanger. It wasn't a traditional dress. Emily had refused anything too elaborate. It was a silk dress in champagne color, flowing and elegant, that fit her belly perfectly and made her feel beautiful without being over the top. "It's time, dear. Let's get you ready," Sarah said with that maternal smile that had become so familiar in recent months. In the room reserved for the bride, while Rachel helped Emily get dressed and Sarah styled her hair into a loose bun with a few strands framing her face, Mrs. Smith entered holding a small box. "Honey, your father sent this," she said, and there was a deep emotion in her voice. Emily froze. Her father, who had separated from Mrs. Smith when she was 15 and had only sporadic contact, rarely showed this kind of gesture. Inside the box was a delicate pearl necklace and a handwritten note, "For my daughter on her wedding day. Your grandmother wore this when she married your grandfather, and I always wanted you to have it. I know that. I haven't been the present father I should have been, but I am proud of the incredible woman you have become. With love, Dad." The tears that Emily had been holding back finally overflowed. Mrs. Smith placed the necklace around her neck with trembling hands, and for a moment mother and daughter simply embraced, sharing decades of pain, forgiveness, and unspoken love. "You look beautiful, my daughter. So beautiful. And so strong. Stronger than I have ever been," Mrs. Smith whispered. "I learned from the best," Emily replied, squeezing her mother tightly before stepping back and carefully wiping her tears to avoid smudging the light makeup Rachel had applied. Across the hall, in the room reserved for the groom, Gabriel was having his own emotional crisis. David Thompson, who had surprisingly become a close friend in recent months, was adjusting his tie for the third time. "Stop fiddling with that, Gabriel. It's perfect," David said, exasperated but smiling. "What if she changes her mind? What if at the last second she realizes she's making a huge mistake marrying a man 40 years old who comes with enough emotional baggage to fill a Boeing 747? Gabriel voiced his fears, running a hand through his hair and undoing the careful hairstyle that had taken 20 minutes to perfect. "Then she wouldn't be the Emily we know," a voice said from the door. It was Edward Smith, the chairman of the company Gabriel had left, elegantly dressed in a grey suit. "May I come in?" Gabriel nodded affirmatively, surprised by the presence of the older man. "I came to apologize," Edward said bluntly, "for the way the board treated you and Emily, for the pressure we put on you, for the hasty decisions. You built that company with integrity and vision, and we let politics and public perception cloud our judgment. Edward, you don't have to—" Gabriel started, but the older man raised his hand. "I do. And I also came to say that I'm investing in your new consultancy, not as a favor, but because I genuinely believe in what you and Emily are building. The market needs this kind of ethical guidance, and you two together have the credibility of those who have lived through the challenges you will advise on." Gabriel felt a lump in his throat. He shook Edward's hand with genuine gratitude, unable to formulate the right words. "Now go marry that incredible woman before she realizes she can do better," Edward joked, giving Gabriel a pat on the shoulder before leaving. The ceremony was set for 3 in the afternoon, and when the clock struck 2:55, the guests, a small group of about 50 people, including family, close friends and a few colleagues, were already seated on wooden chairs arranged in a semicircle around a small altar decorated with wildflowers. Gabriel stood there under a floral arch, with David and another close friend by his side as groomsmen. His eyes anxiously searched for the entrance, waiting. And then the music began. Not the traditional wedding march, but 1,000 Years by Christina Perri, sung live by a friend of Rachel's who had an angelic voice. Sophie appeared first, tossing rose petals with an adorable seriousness, focused on doing her job perfectly. As she passed Gabriel, she winked at him and whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Don't be nervous, Uncle Gabriel. My mum loves you so much." Soft laughter rippled through the guests, and Gabriel felt his tension begin to dissipate. Rachel and Sarah followed, walking side by side as bridesmaids. And then Emily appeared, with Mrs. Smith by her side. She had insisted her mother walk her down the aisle, recognizing everything Mrs. Smith had done and sacrificed for her over the years. Gabriel's world stopped. She was absolutely stunning, not just for her physical beauty, although she radiated in that flowing dress, with her hair framing her face, but for the expression in her eyes, determination, love, hope, and a deep peace he had never seen before. Their eyes met across the distance that separated them, and in that moment, everything else faded away. There was no more scandal, no more judgment, no more fears. There were just the two of them, and the impossible journey they had traveled to get there. When Emily finally reached the altar, Mrs. Smith placed her daughter's hand in Gabriel's and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Take care of her. She is strong, but she deserves someone who will care for her too." "With my life," Gabriel promised, and there was a solemnity in his voice that left no doubt about his sincerity. The officiant, a friend of Rachel's, who was a justice of the peace, began the ceremony. But instead of following the traditional script, Gabriel had asked for permission to say his own vows first. "Emily," he began, his voice slightly trembling but firm, When I first saw you 10 months ago, something inside me that had been dead for 5 years awakened, and I fought against it. I fought with all my might because I was afraid to feel again, to allow myself to be vulnerable, to risk my heart after having it shattered so completely when I lost Emily. He paused, wiping away a tear that escaped. But you didn't let me run away. With your intelligence, your strength, your refusal to be less than you deserve, you broke down every wall I built, and when I finally stopped fighting and allowed myself to love you, I discovered something incredible. My heart is big enough to honor the love I had for Emily and fully embrace the love I have for you. They are not competitors. They are different chapters of a life that is finally regaining color and meaning. He held her hands more firmly. I promise to be your partner in every way. I promise to respect your independence even when my protective instinct... I want to wrap you in cotton. I promise to be a present father not only for our baby but for Sophie, who has already completely stolen my heart. I promise to build a life with you based on honesty, respect, and true love. And I promise that when things get tough, and they will, because that's how life is, I won't run away. I'll stay. I'll fight, and we'll overcome together. There were no dry eyes among the guests. Even David was discreetly wiping away tears. Then it was Emily's turn. She took a deep breath, squeezing Gabriel's hands as an anchor. Gabriel, when I walked into that office 10 months ago, I had a very clear plan for my life. It was a safe, controlled plan that protected my heart from more disappointments. And you completely blew that plan apart. You made me feel things I swore I would never feel again. You made me take risks when everything in me screamed to play. It's safe. And you know what? I hated you for that. For a few days, I really hated you for making me feel so out of control. Soft laughter echoed, and Gabriel smiled through his tears. But then I realized something. Control is an illusion. Absolute security is an illusion. The only thing real, the only thing that truly matters, is choosing to love even knowing we might get hurt. It's choosing to trust even after being betrayed. It's choosing to build even knowing everything could crumble. She gently touched his face. And I choose you. I choose you every day. With all the complications and imperfections, I promise to be your partner, your equal, never your subordinate or your superior, but your complement. I promise to raise Sophie and our baby with you, building a family based on love, respect, and honest communication. I promise to work alongside you to create something meaningful, where our experience can help others facing the same judgments we faced. And I promise that when you have doubts, and you will, because humans do, I will be here to remind you of how incredible you are and how far we've come together. The officiant, clearly emotional, asked for the rings. Sophie, visibly proud, brought the little pillow where 2 simple gold rings rested, engraved with each other's initials. Gabriel Johnson, do you take Emily Johnson to be your wife, to love and cherish her in joy and in sorrow, in health and in sickness, as long as you both shall live? I do, Gabriel said, sliding the ring onto Emily's finger. Emily Johnson, do you take Gabriel Johnson to be your husband, to love and cherish him, in joy and in sorrow, in health and in sickness, as long as you both shall live? I do, Emily said, placing the ring on him with surprisingly steady hands. Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Gabriel pulled Emily in for a kiss that drew applause and whistles from the guests. It was not a chaste or timid kiss. It was a kiss that promised passion, commitment, and a shared future. When they pulled away, both were laughing and crying simultaneously. "We did it," Emily whispered, resting her forehead against his. "We did," he agreed, "and this is just the beginning." The celebration that followed was exactly as they had planned, intimate, joyful, without excessive formalities. There was delicious food, constant laughter, and heartfelt speeches that alternated between making everyone cry and laugh. Rachel made a particularly memorable toast to Emily, who taught me that sometimes the best stories don't follow the script we planned, and to Gabriel, who was smart enough to recognize an incredible woman when he saw one and brave enough to fight for her, even when the whole world said it was wrong. May you always be this unstoppable team. Sophie, at the makeshift microphone, gave her own speech with the brutal honesty of children. I'm so happy because now Uncle Gabriel is like my real dad. My other dad hardly ever comes to see me, but that's okay because now I have Gabriel. And in 2 months, I'm going to have a baby brother or sister. And the teacher said that families come in all shapes and sizes, and ours is perfect just the way it is. There were no dry eyes after that. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Gabriel took Emily's hand and led her to a quieter corner of the garden, away from the guests. "How are you feeling? Tired? Are your feet swollen? Do you need to sit?" he asked, immediately in protective mode. "I'm great," she assured him, but accepted when he guided her to a wooden bench under a flowering jacaranda tree. "Gabriel, we need to talk about something." "About what?" He sat beside her, immediately alert. "About names for the baby. We haven't decided yet." "Oh," he relaxed, smiling. "Well, I have some ideas. If it's a boy, how about Henry? It was my grandfather's name, the husband of the grandmother who gave me the ring." "Henry Johnson," Emily tested the name. "I like it. It has strength but isn't pretentious. And if it's a girl?" Gabriel was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was heavy with emotion. "Helena. I would like to name our daughter Helena. Not to replace or live in her shadow, but to honor her. So that part of her continues to exist in the world through someone who will be loved just as completely as she was." Emily felt tears fill her eyes again. It was a request laden with meaning, and she understood the courage it took to make it. "Helena Emily Johnson," she said softly, honoring the past and embracing the future. "I think it's perfect." They sat there for a few minutes in comfortable silence, watching the last rays of sun paint the world in gold, listening to the distant sounds of laughter from the party, feeling the baby gently move between them. "Do you think we can make it work?" Emily suddenly asked. "Make everything work? The marriage, the family, the business, balancing it all?" "Honestly, I don't know," Gabriel replied, and his honesty was refreshing. "We're probably going to argue about silly things. We're going to have days when, as we question whether we made the right choice, we will make mistakes as parents and business partners. But you know what else?" "What?" "We will forgive each other. We will learn. We will grow together, and at the end of each difficult day, we will remember why we chose this. Why we chose each other." He turned to her, cupping her face in his hands. "Emily, love isn't about having all the answers or everything being perfect. It's about choosing to stay and work through it even when it gets tough. And I choose you, today, tomorrow, and every day that is yet to come." "I choose you too," she whispered, and kissed him softly. When they returned to the party, they found Sophie dancing with Mrs. Smith, Sarah animatedly chatting with Edward about social investments, and Rachel laughing at something David had said. It was a scene of imperfect yet perfect happiness. 2 months later, on a chilly December morning, Emily went into labor. David, true to his word, was by her side every second, holding her hand, wiping her sweat, whispering words of encouragement, even when she screamed that she hated him for putting her in this situation. At 6:17 on a Saturday morning, Emily Johnson came into the world screaming, weighing 7 pounds and 2 ounces, with an impressive head of black hair and lungs stronger than the obstetrician had seen in years of practice. When they placed her in Emily's arms and David knelt beside the bed to see his daughter for the first time, the world stopped again. The baby opened her eyes, still undefined, but promising to be brown like her mother's, and seemed to look directly at David. "Hi, Princess," he whispered, gently touching the tiny hand that instantly wrapped around his finger. "Your daddy is here, and I promise to always be here for you and your mom and your sister." When Sophie arrived at the hospital a few hours later, brought by Mrs. Smith, she was mesmerized by her little sister. "She's so tiny," Sophie whispered reverently. "Can I hold her?" With Emily's help, Sophie held Emily for the first time, and the pure love on the 8-year-old's face brought even the toughest nurses to tears. "Hi, Emily. I'm your big sister, Sophie, and I will take care of you forever. No one will be mean to you because I won't allow it. And I will teach you everything I know about Disney princesses and how to make slime and math too, because Mom says it's important," Sophie said seriously, and then gently kissed the baby's forehead. 3 months after Emily's birth, David and Emily officially launched their consultancy, Johnson & Johnson, Corporate Ethics and Human Relations Consulting. The slogan was simple, yet powerful. Because people are not numbers, and relationships are not policies. Their first major client was, ironically, the Johnson Investment Group itself, which hired them to develop a comprehensive harassment prevention and ethical relationship management program in the workplace. Their story was featured in several business magazines, not as a scandal, but as a case study on how to navigate conflicts of interest with integrity, on how to build something meaningful from difficult circumstances, on how love can flourish even in the most unlikely environments. Not everything was perfect, of course. There were sleepless nights, with Emily crying inconsolably. There were heated discussions when David tried to take too much control over projects that were supposed to be equal partnerships. There were days when Emily questioned whether she could balance motherhood, marriage, and career without losing her mind. But there were also constant laughter, family hugs on Sunday mornings, the pride of seeing their business grow organically based on reputation and excellent work, the joy of Sophie bringing home excellent report cards from the new private school they could now afford, Emily's first steps, the first mommy and daddy babbled. A year after the wedding, on another spring Saturday with blooming jacarandas, they returned to the small hall where they had married to celebrate Emily's first birthday. Among birthday cakes and colorful decorations, surrounded by friends and family, David pulled Emily into a dance. "Are you happy?" he asked as they swayed gently to the ambient music. "Exhausted, constantly worried if I'm doing everything right, with permanent dark circles, and my body still hasn't completely returned to normal after the pregnancy," she listed, but she was smiling. "And yes, immensely, deeply happy." "Me too," he said, kissing her forehead. "You know, sometimes I still wake up and can't believe this is real. That I have you, I have Sophie, I have Emily, that we built such a beautiful life from something that started so complicated." "You know what's funny?" Emily rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "If someone had told me a year ago everything that was going to happen, losing my job, facing public scandal, having to rebuild from scratch, I would have panicked. I would have thought it was the end of the world, but it wasn't. It was a new beginning. It was destroying a version of me that was safe but unhappy, to build a version that is vulnerable but whole." "You're amazing, you know," he said, not for the first time, and certainly not for the last. "We are amazing together," she corrected, and as they danced, surrounded by the love of family and friends, with their daughters laughing nearby and a future full of possibilities stretching ahead, Emily Johnson, because yes, she had taken his last name not out of tradition but by choice, realized something fundamental. True love is not about having the perfect story. It's about having the courage to write your own story, even when everyone says you're doing it wrong. It's about finding someone who sees you, really sees you, with all your imperfections, fears, and scars, and she chooses to stay anyway. It's about building a family not based on impossible ideals, but on mutual respect, constant effort, and the refusal to give up when things get tough. Gabriel had been her obsession, she didn't deny that, but she had also been his salvation, and together they had transformed an impossible situation into something not only possible, but extraordinary. It wasn't a fairy tale, it was better, it was real, and real with all its imperfections was exactly where she wanted to be. Months turned into years. Sophie grew up to be a brilliant teenager, torn between math and drama, but never doubting the love of the family she had. Emily developed her mother's strong personality and her father's quiet determination, promising one day to continue the family consulting legacy. Johnson & Johnson became a national reference in corporate ethics, consulting from small startups to multinational giants. And always, always on the wall of the main office, there was a framed photo. Gabriel and Emily on their wedding day, under the flower arch, with Sophie by their side, and Emily pregnant with Helena, all smiling at the camera with a joy that couldn't be faked. And when clients asked in that photo, about the story behind it, Gabriel and Emily always answered the same thing. It's the story of how love can bloom in the most unlikely places, and how sometimes the best things in life come exactly when you stop planning and start living.